what's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with something a little bit different. We've wondered here at the channel what it could look like here, not only for this upcoming season, but for the next 30 years of college football coming in our direction. So hopefully you guys are excited for this video, and if there's any other one-off ideas that you have, certainly let me know down in the comment section. But it certainly should be a fun one, man. Gonna use this game to predict how the next 30 years of college football, what is that going to look like? I'm very excited to see how this turns out, and I hope you guys are as well. So go ahead and get comfortable. I'm sure it's going to be a long video, so make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you have to be brand new. And with that being said, let's go ahead and check out what this preseason top 25 is going to be looking like, at least initially. So it looks like the media does have Georgia as the #1 team in America, but there's a couple of other teams out there that could be national title contenders. Ohio State certainly is a team that could be a national contender here in your #1. And then actually looking at some of these other teams right here, I think those are going to be the two favorites actually. Like Ohio State and Georgia, probably going to be your two favorites when it's all said and done. I mean, with that being said, I guess we'll get to the end of the season to see how things end up actually shaking out here in this first season of this sim. So we get through the end of the regular season in our first year of this sim, and they're saying that this upcoming season, Dillon Gabriel, the former UCF and Oklahoma transfer, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, throwing for almost 4,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, and just one interception as well. As for the other award winners, Dillon Gabriel is also going to win the Player of the Year. Head Coach of the Year is going to go to Keith Burgess of Texas A&M. He's got them to a 12-1 record, and likely will have Texas A&M in the college football playoff. Best quarterback is going to also go to Dillon Gabriel. Jordan Burch at defensive end will win the best defensive player. He's from Oregon. Brandon Jordan of Texas A&M will win best defensive back. Best running back will go to Tajay Brooks of Texas Tech. Best receiver will go to Jordan Bray out of West Virginia. Jordan Bunch will also win the Lombardi Award. Johnny Unitas Golden Arm also going to go to Dillon Gabriel. No surprises there. Best defensive end will be Jordan Burch. Best interior lineman is Tate Rutledge of Georgia. You saw him on the thumbnail. Oscar Delp is the best tight end in the country. He's a junior and from Georgia. The Bros Award goes to the best assistant, and that's going to go to Colt Brazos from Texas A&M. Best linebacker is Harold Perkins Jr. of LSU. Best center is Parker Brailsford of Alabama. The Luke Rose Award is going to go to Dominic Dazaban of Miami of Ohio. Go Red Hawks. Best punter is going to go to Tommy Donman. And the best special teams return is going to go to Imarian Stewart, a wide receiver from Michigan. Meanwhile, what we saw from Conference Championship Weekend is that Jacksonville State is going to beat Mid-Tennessee State to win the Conference USA. Texas Tech is going to beat Iowa State to win the Big 12. Akron barely beats Miami for the MAC, so shout out to the Zips on reaching 10 wins. Texas State beats Old Dominion in the Sun Belt. Eastern Carolina is going to beat Rice in the American Championship game. Utah State wins a close one against UNLV in the Mountain West. Texas A&M will get an automatic bye into the SEC Championship. Syracuse beating Louisville, so Syracuse will likely be in the playoff as well. And then Michigan is going to beat Iowa 27-14 in order to win the Big Ten Championship. So this was what the college football playoff bracket is going to end up being, with Michigan, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Syracuse all getting buys into the playoff. Other teams that I haven't talked about already getting in is Maryland and Clemson. Both used to be members of the same conference. LSU is going to take on NC State. Notre Dame will travel to Iowa. They just lost the Big Ten Championship game. And then Akron actually is going to get the automatic bid from a group of 5, is going to take on Oregon in the MAC Championship. So we'll go ahead and see who ends up winning the college football playoff after we check out some notable bowl results. So just keeping it into like bowl season, as well as maybe some of the college football playoff results. So for the Texas Bowl, Georgia does beat Arizona 45-24 in order to achieve a 10-win season. And then Miami is going to beat UTSA, which means the Roadrunners will likely not finish as a top 25 team when the polls come out. And then we also have the first round of the playoffs where NC State beats LSU, Iowa beats Notre Dame, Clemson narrowly beats Maryland, and then Oregon is going to crush Akron at Autzen Stadium. Meanwhile, for week number 2 of bowl season, Oregon is going to be able to beat Syracuse, so Oregon makes it to the semifinals. Michigan beats Clemson, so Clemson will lose their trip. Iowa does beat Texas Tech, so Iowa is going to make a little bit of a Cinderella run. And then NC State is going to beat Texas A&M in order to get to the semifinals as well. Speaking of that semifinals, Iowa is going to take down NC State. And then Michigan is going to beat Oregon 38-24, which means we'll get a rematch of the Big Ten Championship in the Natty. However, the Iowa Hawkeyes will not get revenge for losing the Big Ten Championship earlier this season, as the Michigan Wolverines are going to be able to win convincingly, beating Iowa 48-17, which is going to wrap up year 1 of this simulation. So welcome to year number 2 as we take a little look around the country just to see who the pundits have as the favorite, and they want Michigan to repeat, could see them with the potential to repeat for a national championship. But it does overall feel like it is a little bit more open than last year. Oregon looks like they have a better football team, and Clemson is of a similar caliber as well, and that's just within the top 5. Outside of the top 5, there's some other contenders to take a look out for. Miami, Texas A&M are also going to be in this group, with Maryland getting some love at number 8. LSU is a pretty good football team alongside Alabama, looking for year 2 to go well under Kalen DeBoer. Georgia probably has the best talent roster in the country, but they got to put it all together. Louisville could surprise some people over in the ACC. Notre Dame is certainly not bad either. Ohio State, also another one of those teams that just couldn't put it together in year number 1. Texas, another one of those teams, they failed to make the playoff even though they had Quinn Ewers. UCF could be someone to watch out for. UCF could certainly surprise some folks as well. And then we do have a group of 5 team in the top 25. That is the Rice Owls, coming in at number 23 in the country. But as we get closer to year number 2 coming to an end, we find out who the Heisman Trophy winner is going to be. And it's going to be Cade Klubnik, the senior quarterback out of Clemson, also throwing for nearly 4,000 yards and putting very similar stats up compared with what we saw with Dylan Gabriel, for example. As for the other award winners of year number 2, Cade Klubnik is also going to win Player of the Year. Head Coach of the Year is going to go to the Clemson head coach and Garrick Renato. Best quarterback also obviously going to go to Cade Klubnik. Best defensive player goes to Damon Clowney of Charlotte, so a little bit of love for the American. Gentry Williams from Oklahoma will win Best Defensive Back. Darius Taylor of Michigan will win the Best Running Back Award, able to get behind the shadow of Donovan Edwards and others. Best receivers, Jermaine Burney, who I think he was someone that transferred in from a different team. He's a senior from Las Vegas. Damon Clowney is also going to win the Lombardi Award. John Unitas Golden Arm Award is also going to go to Cade Klubnik. Best defensive end goes to Damon Clowney of Charlotte. Best interior lineman goes to Dylan Fairchild, who at this point is that rare 99 overall. Oscar Delp wins the best tight end for the second year in a row. Tim McKinney on that Clemson staff is going to win the Broyles Award for Best Assistant. Sammy Brown will win Best Linebacker. Best Center goes to Drew Bobo of Georgia. Lou Groza is going to go to Grady Gross of Washington. Best Punter goes to Brett Forson of Georgia. And your Best Special Teams Returner is Ryan Niblett, a sophomore wide receiver from the University of Texas. As for the conference championships that we've witnessed for conference championship weekend, Mid-Tennessee State, they lost last year, but this time they will exact their revenge by beating FIU 42-31. Akron does return to the MAC championship, but they will not repeat as they lose to Ohio 34-18. Baylor beats Houston in the Big 12 championship. Old Dominion, I think they might have been in the Sun Belt last year, but they beat Arkansas State by a field goal. Georgia is going to beat the Texas A&M defending national not defending national champions, but SEC champs 34-31. They'll likely have the top seed. Charlotte does win the American. Nevada spoils Utah State's season and removes the Aggies' chances of getting that Group of 5 bid. And then for the second year in a row, Michigan does win the Big Ten championship, with Clemson beating Miami 41-23 in terms of that ACC title game. So this is what the bracket looks like this upcoming season for year number 2. Georgia is your number 1 seed, followed by Michigan, Clemson, and Baylor. Michigan going to be your defending national champs. Ohio State was a third place person in the Big Ten, tied with Penn State, and both of those teams did end up making it. Ohio State will take on Texas A&M for the first round matchup, while Miami will host Penn State. Oregon will take on Virginia Tech, who had an 8-win season. And then USC is going to host Ohio. So this is the second year in a row where the MAC is able to get a team into the college football playoff. But before we see who ends up winning the national championship this year, we'll check out some of the notable bowl games that are out there. Oregon does beat Virginia Tech in order to move on to the quarterfinals. Ohio State does beat the defending SEC champions, but did not win in year number 2, 42-24. They'll move on to take on Georgia, I believe. USC actually was given a good game against Ohio as the Bobcats nearly pulled the upset off, but USC will move on to the quarterfinals as well. And Penn State is able to beat Michigan 48-42 in order to move on to the quarterfinals. So a good showing for the Big Ten. As for the quarterfinals, though, it was a little bit of a different story as Georgia ends up dominating Ohio State in order to reach the semifinals. Oregon also will pull the upset off on Clemson 26-21. Within the Big Ten, Penn State loses to Michigan 28-23. That team up north getting a deep run in yet again. Baylor beating USC 36-29. And then the Music City Bowl had 2 non-playoff teams, but it was a good matchup. Wisconsin ends up beating a shootout against Oklahoma 35-33, who also happens to be in the SEC. At least Oklahoma is. And then, of course, your national championship appearance teams is going to be Michigan after beating Oregon 38-21. And then Georgia ends up beating Baylor 42-32. However, the team up north is not going to be able to defend their national championship crown, as what ended up happening in Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami. The Georgia Bulldogs are able to complete a perfect 16-0 season, and they culminated and top it off with a 41-21 victory in the national championship. So Georgia's going to win the Natty here in year number 2. But even though Georgia did win the national championship in the previous season, once again, Michigan is going to be listed as the preseason number 1 team in the country, even though I think Georgia actually might have the better talent roster when it's all said and done, which creates an interesting scenario to where we could see an open national championship race once again. We're talking about teams like Clemson, Penn State, Oregon, and of course Ohio State certainly having a legitimate shot, and these are probably going to be your 6 favorites going into this season. However, there might be a few dark horses lying around in this top 25. Miami is going to be doing some work here as an 86 overall. Texas A&M certainly cannot be counted out either. South Carolina could make some noise within the SEC as well. They open up as the preseason number 12 team in America alongside Oklahoma. Texas Tech could do a little something. They're the favorite to win the Big 12 this year. We got Wisconsin as well. They are going to be an 86 overall. Interesting enough, we see UConn preseason number 16. UConn actually doesn't have a bad football team for a change, which That would be wild if UConn could actually make a college football playoff. But rounding out your top 25 in terms of teams that could make noise to win national championship in year number 3, got Alabama at 17, Ole Miss at 18, and then rounding things out, you got Notre Dame at 22, UCF at number 23, and then Florida State is there at number 25. But we do see yet another group of 5 team in this preseason top 25, and it is Eastern Carolina, who did win the American in year number 1, but did not accomplish that same task in year number 2. Alright boys, so we get through the simulation of year number 3, and another Clemson quarterback is able to win the Heisman. This is Christopher Vicini, and Christopher Vicini threw for over 4,800 yards and 56 touchdowns on the way to helping Clemson win an ACC championship. And speaking of those championships at the conference level, we'll go ahead and check that out here briefly. Liberty is able to beat Mid-Tennessee State 39-37. Ball State beat Akron by a field goal as well. Colorado beats Oklahoma State 28-23. Southern Miss beats Coastal Carolina 33-24 in the Sun Belt. In the SEC, and this is a big surprise, South Carolina dominates Georgia in the SEC championship. Meanwhile, USF wins a close one against Eastern Carolina. Colorado State actually beats Boise State 28-21, and I have everything automated, so I don't have any impact on Colorado State, in case those are wondering. Wisconsin beat Washington in the Big Ten Championship, and then Clemson is able to win the ACC Championship, like I said, against Miami for the 2nd year in a row. But this is what your college football playoff bracket is going to look like, and a little bit of a surprise here, right? So we got a nice bunch of teams here. Clemson does get the number 1 overall seed, but we do have a little bit of love for the Mountain West, as Colorado State does make it. They're a 4th seed, and they'll host Michigan and Colorado for that college football, over in the semifinals. That will happen for the Peach Bowl. Georgia and Oklahoma State get in. Miami and Ohio State also are represented. Ohio State not even making it to the Big Ten Championship. Florida got in as a 9-3 SEC team, and Washington is your 11 seed as the runner-up for the Big Ten. Quickly checking out the other bowl winners, as we are not other bowl winners, but the other award winners, before checking out how things go with the rest of postseason. Cam Coleman does win Player of the Year. He's a junior wide receiver from Clemson, so this is the first time the Player of the Year is not a quarterback. Head Coach of the Year goes to Paul White, who I imagine will get a possible head coaching job at the Power Conference level. Best quarterback, of course, going to Christopher Vicini, who also won the Heisman. Jason Moore wins Best Defensive Player. He's a defensive tackle at the Ohio State University. Best defensive back goes to Jair Rawlinson, a sophomore redshirt out of Kent State. A lot of love for the Golden Flashes here. Darius Taylor wins the running back of the year from the University of Michigan. Best receiver, of course, going to Cam Coleman. The Lombardi going to Jason Moore, who won that Best Defensive Player of the Year, so no surprise, he's the best defensive lineman in the country as well. United's Golden Arm actually going to a different quarterback. They're going to hand this one off to Gunnar Stockton, a senior redshirt from the University of Georgia. Best defensive end is going to go to Edwin Collage. He's a senior redshirt out of Boston College and represents the nation of Canada. Best interior lineman is going to go to Marquise Easley, the right guard from the University of Georgia. Lawson Lucky is the best tight end in the country. He's also another upperclassman on this Georgia football team. And then for the Broyles Award, that's going to go to Josh Tate, who is a defensive coordinator at the University of Wisconsin. Although the person that I'm controlling in this Dynasty simulation, we almost ended up somehow winning that. Best linebacker goes to Bobby Walker-Smith, a senior redshirt from the University of Alabama. Best center goes to Quandre Hellman, a freshman redshirt out of Georgia. This is the first time that we see a AI-generated player for a award winner. John Love is a senior redshirt who wins the Lou Groza for Virginia Tech. Best punter goes to Dylan Joyce out of Miami. And then your best special teams person is Rodney Fields Jr. from Oklahoma State. He's a sophomore redshirt. As for checking out how things go in some notable bowl games as well as the college football playoff, here in the Alamo Bowl, we had a good matchup between Oregon and West Virginia, where the Oregon Ducks were able to prevail. Meanwhile, in the college football playoff, Florida was able to dominate Washington. Oklahoma State is going to beat Georgia 35-28. Michigan was actually in a close one with Colorado. The Wolverines won by a field goal. And then to round out the first round of college football playoff, we did see Ohio State beat Miami 35-14. Meanwhile, for the Gator Bowl, Texas was able to beat SMU 45-35 in a ranked matchup outside of the college football playoff. As for the quarterfinals and how that went down, Clemson was able to beat Oklahoma State 41-38. South Carolina beat Florida 27-26 in a matchup that usually takes place within the SEC. Speaking of conference matchups, a Big Ten won as Wisconsin beat Ohio State by a couple of touchdowns. And then Colorado State was actually able to upset Michigan as the Rams ended up winning 24-21. However, the true contenders start to shine as South Carolina was able to beat Wisconsin by 12. And then Clemson was able to beat Colorado State 38-17, so the Cinderella run for the Colorado State Rams does come to an end. But in a matchup that usually takes place towards the end of the regular season, South Carolina was able to beat Clemson 31-27, so South Carolina will win their first national championship in this 30-year simulation. So now this brings us into year number 4, and this is what we see going into year number 4. So we find ourselves with the preseason rankings. We see that Ohio State is the preseason number 1 team in the nation. They do have a pretty strong team, a very complete football team, coming in at that very strong 90 overall. So it's going to be hard for many of these teams to match up with what Ohio State could potentially do, but there's certainly a few teams to watch out for as we go into year number 4. One of those teams is, of course, the Georgia Bulldogs, where in any given year, Georgia has the ability to win a national championship. We saw that in year number 2. The Miami Hurricanes also have one of their best teams fielded in years, so the Miami Hurricanes are also going to be a team to watch here in year number 4 as well. And while there wasn't any other elite teams in the nation, this is a year in which we saw some group of 5 schools really start to get some love. Particularly Boise State seems like they have a very strong football team. University of Southern Florida is ranked in the top 20. UAB is also here at number 21. And then of course the school that made it all the way to the semifinals of the college football playoff last year, they're here still in this top 25, ranked at number 23 in the entire country. And with that, I'll see you guys towards the end of season number 4 to let you guys know how that particular year played out. Alright, so welcome to year number 4, where we see the first Heisman Trophy for the Florida Gators since Tim Tebow stepped onto the campus. It's DJ Lagway, who ends up throwing for nearly 4,000 yards and 46 touchdowns throughout his senior campaign. As for the other award winners throughout college football, DJ Lagway is also going to be named Player of the Year. Head Coach of the Year is going to be Austin Jennings from Mid-Tennessee State, leading the Blue Raiders to a very successful 11-2 campaign thus far. Best quarterback also is going to be DJ Lagway as well. A little bit of a surprise here, we get a UMass mention. Mitch Goodman, the junior out of Skillman, New Jersey, he's going to win Best Defensive Player. Dianco Paredes is going to be the best defensive back in the country. He is a sophomore from the University of Alabama. For Best Running Back, that's going to go to Javonte Shipp, a senior redshirt from that team up north. Best Receiver goes to Marshawn Brown, a senior redshirt out of Nevada. Lombardi also going to go to Mitch Goodman out of UMass. Johnny Unitas Golden Arm, unsurprisingly going to DJ Lagway, who won Player of the Year and also won the Heisman Trophy as well. Best defensive end in the country goes to Devin Baxter out of the team up north. speaking of those Michigan boys, Alex Andreas from Michigan is going to win Best Interior Lineman. A lot of Michigan guys there in that award list particularly. As for Best Tight Ends, going to stay in the SEC though, as Ty Lockwood out of the University of Alabama is going to be able to win that title. The Broyles Award, which goes to the best assistant in college football, is going to be provided to Greg Blunt, who was the defensive coordinator for the Crimson Tide. Best linebacker goes to R.L. Miller from Fresno State. Best center is Jake Guarnera from Michigan. He's a junior redshirt. The Luke Rosa Award is going to go to Grant Medors from Oregon. Tyler White wins the best punter from Texas A&M. And rounding out your awards is Katie Daniels, a senior tailback who was considered the best special teams returner here in year number 4. But now let's go ahead and check out some of the award winners that we've had in year number 4, at least from a conference championship perspective. Mid-Tennessee State does beat Western Kentucky 38-32 to win their second Conference USA title in the last 3 years. Toledo is going to win their first MAC championship of this video as they beat Ohio by 5. Texas Tech beat Cincinnati 27-24 in order to claim their second Big 12 championship. Old Dominion wins their second Sun Belt title in the last 3 years by beating Troy convincingly. Alabama beats Florida 28-21, their first SEC title since Nick Saban retired. FAU beats Eastern Carolina 30-17. Fresno State beats Utah State 19-17. Wisconsin gonna be back-to-back Big Ten champions. They beat Michigan once again. And then Miami does end up beating Florida State 38-34. They win their first ACC title in this 30-year sim. As for how the regular season turned out, or at least how bowl season and other playoff games happened, we did have another exciting Alamo Bowl where Utah is able to outlast Oregon. They're able to get their 10th win here in year number 4. And then in terms of what we saw in terms of the college football playoff, Notre Dame is back and Oklahoma State is back as well. Oklahoma State narrowly beats Notre Dame. Michigan does lose to Florida 35-23, so the Heisman Trophy winner does at least make it to the quarterfinals. USC beats Fresno State 31-21, and then Kentucky, yes, Kentucky did make it to the college football playoff. And not only that, but Kentucky also beat South Carolina as well, who was your defending national champions. As for how other things played out in terms of the college football playoff, Wisconsin got one of the byes as they were the Big Ten champs. They move on to the semis after beating Florida. Miami was actually one of your top teams, and they beat Oklahoma State big time. They won by 30 plus. However, we did have an upset in the Sugar Bowl where Kentucky was able to best Alabama, even though Alabama had a bye for the SEC champion. And then Mid-Tennessee State surprisingly had a bye as well, and they beat USC, so they were at least able to back it up. For your semifinal game, so Miami had a thriller against Kentucky as the Hurricanes were able to barely outlast the Kentucky Wildcats. And then Wisconsin was able to beat Mid-Tennessee State 28-25. But it was the Miami Hurricanes that were able to win the national championship, though. At NRG Stadium, they beat up Wisconsin 34-28. Miami was one of those teams to keep an eye on in terms of a dark horse. Although I will say Ohio State, who was a preseason #1 team in the nation, they fail to make the college football playoff in its entirety. And now this takes us into year number 5, which is actually the last year where any of the real players are in this simulation. So really curious to see where we end up at year number 5, and might stop and give a little bit of an update in terms of where we're at, in terms of who's won what. But Miami is going to be your #1 team in the nation to start things off. Miami does have a pretty complete team. They are a 90 overall. So I'm very curious to see if Miami is going to be able to pull off this repeat here in year number 5. Although, as always, there's certainly a couple of teams to watch out for over the course of this season. Georgia always has one of the best teams in the country from a talent perspective. They didn't make the playoff last year, but they can certainly put it all together. There's also a little bit of love for the group of 5, as Tulane is going to start off as your top group of 5 team. They come in at number 17 in the country. UAB, however, is not too far behind, as they're ranked number 19 in the nation. Ohio State is seen as a dark horse this year as they try to rebound from what was really a disappointing season in year number 4. And then the team that made it all the way to the semifinals representing the Conference USA is Mid-Tennessee State, who is ranked in the preseason top 25, ranked at number 24 in the nation. And now, I'll see you guys at the end of the regular season to see if there's any updates that are worth giving to you. Alright, so in the 2028 season, we start with an interesting nugget of information here. Tim Fresh, a sophomore quarterback from Virginia, and is one of those computer-generated guys at this point. He wins the Heisman, and I believe this is the first Heisman Trophy winner that Virginia would have ever had. But if there was any Heisman Trophy winner from Virginia before this guy, let me know down in the comment section. But this is very interesting to see. As for other award winners, this might be the first time where the Player of the Year might have been different than the Heisman Trophy winner, which is really interesting. Usually that's not the case, at least so far in this sim. Josh Diaz is the quarterback at USC. He's a junior redshirt. He actually is the one that wins Player of the Year, which might have meant that, hey, things could have actually been very interesting in terms of maybe it was a really close Heisman Trophy race. As for head coach of the year, I'm not surprised that this ends up being Joel Burndown. Joel Burndown has been in Virginia for quite some time and has quietly built a really strong program, culminated by the type of success that Virginia's had this year. As for best quarterback, that of course is also going to go to Tim Fresh. Camden Hardy is going to win the Best Defensive Player Award. He is a senior redshirt from the Florida Gators, and he's one of the few real guys that is actually still left. Best defensive back goes to Des Ricks of Norfolk, Virginia. The Texas A&M corner is also one of the few real guys remaining. Best running back goes to Deontay Paul of the University of Georgia. Evan Cameron is the best receiver / Blinokoff winner. Also one of the last real guys remaining at this point. Cameron Hardy is also going to win the Lombardi Award. Tucker Paris wins the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. So definitely not a consensus in terms of who was the best quarterback in college football this year. As for Kyle Durham, he wins the best defensive end in the country. He's from Missouri. Aba Selm is the best interior lineman playing for the Florida Gators. Tony Epps wins Best Tight End Award, so Georgia continues its tradition of winning this piece of hardwood. The Bros Award goes to the defensive coordinator at Virginia in Daniel Moricola, who has been doing some great work with the Virginia Cavaliers. Best linebacker goes to Ladarius Lane out of Michigan State. Aba Selm also wins the best center in the country. He also won interior lineman. Arian Burrell is the best kicker with the Lou Groza Award. He's from LSU. Then Jose Carvalho is going to be the best punter in America, winning this piece of hardware, with Devin Brooks, the junior tailback out of Illinois, winning the best special teams returner in all of college football. Alright, but let's take a look at how conference championships ended up shaking out, as Western Kentucky does beat Liberty 45-17. They win their first Conference USA title in this sim. Utah is going to be able to beat Colorado 42-40. Colorado nearly able to repeat, winning the Big 12. Speaking of repeats though, Toledo does repeat as MAC champions. Troy is going to beat Appalachian State 36-21. Florida beats Texas A&M 45-24. So this is the 5th different team that has won the SEC just in this sim alone. USF beats UAB 24-21. They win their second American title game in the last 3 years. Boise State wins their first Mountain West title as they dominate San Diego State. Virginia is going to win the ACC though. Virginia going to beat Cal 42-21. And then USC wins its very first Big Ten championship game in school history. So this gives us some insight in terms of how the bracket breaks out for year number 5. And USC actually does get the number 1 overall seed, with Virginia's Heisman Trophy winner does get to go play in the quarterfinal automatically. In terms of teams to watch out for to win the title, Georgia is certainly a team to watch. They're an 8 seed, and they will start by hosting NC State. Ohio State could also make some noise as well as they go to Boulder, Colorado to take on the Colorado Buffaloes. And then with that being said as well, USF is a group of 5 representative making it from the American Conference. They were a team that I believe was ranked in the preseason top 25 to begin the year. So now we'll check in on how things shook out in notable bowl games as well as the college football playoff results here in year number 5. So the first one is actually the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which had a ranked Cincinnati take on a ranked Clemson team, and Clemson was able to prevail. They narrowly beats the Cincinnati Bearcats 28-26, but there was far more attention on what we saw in the college football playoff. For starters, Colorado was able to beat Ohio State 28-17. Georgia does beat NC State by 10 in their home stadium. USF does knock out Kentucky in the first round, so the Bulls get to move on to the quarterfinals. And then Illinois actually takes down the Michigan Wolverines. The Fighting Illini won by 4 in this one. As for the quarterfinals, USC was able to beat Georgia. Colorado beats Utah. They dominate the Utes, and a little bit of revenge there, a little bit of get back in the Big 12 like regular season. Florida narrowly takes down Illinois, but they only won by a handful of points. And then USF was able to overcome the Heisman Trophy winner and this Virginia Cavaliers team. So for the 3rd year in a row, a group of 5 team actually makes it to the semifinals. But we will have to wait another year to see if a group of 5 team can ever make it to the national championship, as USC is able to stop the Cinderella of year 5. Colorado, however, is going to be able to beat Florida 31-22. So a former Pac-12 conference game going to be your national championship. And ultimately, the Colorado Buffaloes will beat USC in the Jerry's World to win their first national championship in this Sims. Deion Sanders is able to get a big win in Primetime's biggest moment of the sport. So even though we just made it to the point where we're only 5 years in this thing, there's multiple programs that actually have multiple conference championships already, including 2 such in the Big Ten. Michigan and Wisconsin, for example, are able to win 2 Big Ten championships each, but they're certainly not alone. Clemson has the early lead with 2 championships in the ACC. Southern Florida has multiple American titles. Old Dominion is off to a fast start as well. They won 2 Sun Belts. The Toledo has won the MAC twice. Texas Tech has won the Big 12 a couple of times. And then finally, Mid-Tennessee State is off to a fast start in the Conference USA, which includes the newest member in Kennesaw State. They've won a couple of Conference USA championships. Now, jumping into year number 6, though, it does give off this feeling that this national championship race could truly feel more open than what we have seen in the past. So Michigan is the number 1 ranked team in the nation to start out year number 6, but there's certainly some other teams that could absolutely compete. Florida is one of those teams. They're right up there as a top 5 squad. Georgia, of course, always has one of the best rosters in the country. Virginia, who had the Heisman Trophy winner coming back, I believe, they're going to be ranked in the top 10. Colorado is your defending national champions. They come in ranked at number 7. Utah has a pretty good team, and Utah also was able to make the playoff last year. Miami, of course, always has one of the best talent rosters in America, and they come in ranked number 11. Same with Ohio State. Clemson, Texas A&M, South Carolina, LSU, Notre Dame, these are all teams that certainly could make some noise in the college football playoff this year, with Texas A&M in the back end alongside Wisconsin. USF, who looks like they're going to be the highest ranked group of 5 team this year. They made it all the way to the semifinals in year number 5. Then rounding out your group, you also have UAB and Western Kentucky representing for the group of 5 within this preseason top 25. So that being said, let's see how year number 6 ends up playing out. Alright boys, so to get started with the 2029 college football season, we do see the Heisman Trophy return back to the SEC as Ross Hyman, the junior quarterback out of Georgia, is able to win the award for this season. Now, as for the other award winners of year number 6, we do see Ross Hyman win the Player of the Year award, and he was a pivotal part of Georgia coming in as the number 1 team in the nation, finally living up to their potential as a football team. Meanwhile, head coach of the year is going to go to James Graham, who is the head coach of Toledo. He's been doing some great work with the Toledo Rockets. Best quarterback also goes to Ross Hyman of Georgia. Stephen Shipp wins the Best Defensive Player award for the Miami Hurricanes. As for Best Defensive Back, that goes to Henry Stingley, the junior redshirt out of Milford, Ohio, and playing for the Toledo Rockets. As for Best Running Back, that goes to Mike Walker, the tailback from Wisconsin. He's a Queen City native as well. For Best Receiver, actually, this one's surprised. I'm not going to lie to you. We have an Army receiver winning the Best Receiver in college football, so Army had to have gotten a new playbook because there ain't no way. That's absolutely wild to see, to be honest with you. Lombardi Award, however, is going to also go to Stephen Shipp. John Unitas Golden Arm is going to go to Amani Ambata, the senior redshirt out of the University of Alabama. One of the lead quarterbacks in college football for sure. For Best Defensive End, Stephen Shipp continues to impress. This is his third award already here in year 6. Best Interior Lineman goes to George Weigert, the senior redshirt out of the University of Georgia. Tony Epps, a tight end from Georgia, does win the Best Tight End award, and I believe he won this last year, if I'm not mistaken. As for the Broyles Award, it goes to Ty Davidson, who is an offensive coordinator for the Toledo Rockets. Best Linebacker will be provided to Matthew Landers out of Wisconsin. Best Center is Jake Muse, the center out of Alabama. Lou Groza is going to go to Antoine Dorsey, as he is the best kicker in college football, and he played for Kansas State. Marco Renesto from Georgia wins the Best Punter Award. And then finally, the Best Special Teams Returner goes to Fainu Bayless, the senior redshirt out of the University of Alabama, finally making his impact here in his final year of eligibility. Alright y'all, so for the conference championship games, here's what we had going for year number 6. Liberty is going to go and beat Western Kentucky 33-28, and this is Liberty's second Conference USA title over the last 3 seasons. Kansas State is going to claim their first Big 12 title in this sim as they narrowly take down Texas Tech, who is coming off of defending their Big 12 championship. Toledo, however, is going to be on a tear as they win their 3rd consecutive MAC championship game. Toledo beating Akron 27-17. Southern Miss is going to beat Appalachian State 20-19. Army is going to claim their first American title. They beat Tulane 23-22. Alabama is going to fall to Georgia, and the Georgia Bulldogs will win the SEC. This is the first time in, I believe it is in 4 seasons since the last time Georgia's won the SEC championship game. Colorado State, on the other hand, they're going to go ahead and they will actually win their 2nd Mountain West title. Oregon will claim their first Big Ten championship in school history. And then NC State is going to beat Syracuse in order to win their first ACC championship in the simulation. And this is how the bracket is going to play out to start things off here in year number 6. And again, like we mentioned before, we felt like it was a more open field, as the team that ended up being the number 1 preseason team in America, Michigan, did not even make it to the college football playoff. Georgia, however, is going to procure that number 1. Oh, actually, I lied. Michigan did make it to the playoff, but they're a 9 seed, so a little bit of a disappointment, but still have a chance to win it all, I guess. Georgia is going to be your number 1 seed. Oregon is your Big Ten champ. Kansas State from the Big 12, and NC State from the ACC. Your highest wild card team is Texas Tech, who nearly defended their Big 12 championship title, but fell just short. But the Group of 5 team that will be represented is the Toledo Rockets, finally gaining some respect after winning their 3rd consecutive MAC championship. Now, as for how things played off in terms of the postseason of the year number 6, this is what actually ended up going down. Colorado and USC played in one of the more important non-playoff games of year number 6. This was a rematch from the playoff last year. While Colorado wasn't able to defend their national championship, they will beat USC in the Independence Bowl 32-31. Now, as for the playoff itself, Illinois is going to narrowly beat Utah. Michigan is going to beat the Syracuse Orange. Toledo does end up falling to Texas Tech. And then Alabama does end up beating Ole Miss 45-35. Meanwhile, for the Duke's Mayo's Bowl, Miami is going to finish the season out on top, beating Notre Dame 28-21. So, at least there's that to look forward to. But then for these other playoff games, Texas Tech goes on a run. They beat NC State 21-15. Georgia does beat Michigan 48-35 in an absolute shootout. Kansas State beats Illinois 45-35. And then Oregon beats Alabama 21-13 in the Fiesta Bowl. But your national championship game is going to feature the Oregon Ducks after winning against Kansas State convincingly, and the Georgia Bulldogs after narrowly defeating Texas Tech in the Sugar Bowl. But your national champion is going to be the Oregon Ducks, who win their first national championship in this sim. They do it by beating Alabama, Kansas State, and finally Georgia in Glendale, Arizona, 40-17. It was certainly convincing. So the start of season number 7 gets underway, as this is what we have going on in terms of what's that preseason for season number 7 going to be. Now, Oregon does get a lot of love. They're a preseason number 2 team in the nation, but they're saying the Georgia Bulldogs should be heavily favored in terms of getting that love for the national championship. We'll see if we see someone win their second national championship in this sim. A couple of other teams to definitely keep an eye out for is, of course, Miami, who is down here at number 13 in the nation. Ohio State also could make some noise as well. They're going to be ranked number 15 in the country to start things off here in year number 7. Texas A&M certainly also has the ability to make a deep run. They're going to be coming in as a preseason number 18 team in the nation. And then we do have a couple of teams that are going to be some group of 5 darlings. Boise State, who's representing the Mountain West, and then Tulane is in here at number 24 as well. Alright, boys, so here in year number 7, we have a Heisman Trophy winner from Miami for the first time in a minute. Channing Palco, the junior wideout, had over 1,100 yards and 23 touchdowns in his junior campaign. And as for those other awards in year number 7, Channing Palco will also win the Player of the Year award as well. And Coach of the Year is going to be provided to Muhammad Okoye from UAB. He actually is from Miami originally. Best quarterback is going to go to Lee Jerry. He's the quarterback for the Blazers. He's the best quarterback in the country, and he is a junior redshirt. As for best defensive player, that's going to go to left outside linebacker DeMarco Morton, who played for the Akron Zips in his senior year. Best defensive back goes to Marvin Brent, the sophomore corner. So a lot of love for the group of 5 here so far. Kevin Griffin is not from the group of 5 as he plays for Ohio State. He ends up winning the best running back award. Best receiver, of course, is going to go to Channing Palco, who is Player of the Year and the Heisman Trophy winner. Denzel Slade is the best interior defensive lineman in the country. He wins Defensive Lineman of the Year for the #1 Georgia Bulldogs. Vernon Simmons is a quarterback that wins the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. He's a senior redshirt for the Wolfpack. George Littlejohn is best defensive end for Appalachian State. He's going to win the Best Defensive End Award. Darius Story wins Best Interior Lineman for the #1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Daryl Cheeseman wins the Best Tight End Award for UAB. He is a senior redshirt tight end. And maybe it just goes to show that, hey, UAB could maybe make some things happen here if they were invited into the playoffs, hypothetically. Justin Wilson gets named Broyles Award winner. He's an offensive coordinator on that UAB staff. Best linebacker goes to DeMarco Morton from Akron. Martin Doman wins the Best Center Award for the Miami Hurricanes. Dallas Bennis wins the Lou Groza, also from UAB. Best punter is Tyler Bonia from Oregon. He is a junior. And finally, the best return person in college football is Sam Finneganofo. I'm gonna butcher that for sure, but yeah, this sophomore, he ends up winning the best special teams returner, the man with a name that I simply cannot pronounce. Now, as for how national championships played out here in year number 7, this is what we got. New Mexico State wins their Conference USA title in this sim as they narrowly beat Western Kentucky 25-18. Texas Tech will repeat as your Big 12 champion, this time beating Baylor by a couple touchdowns. The reign of Toledo comes to an end as they will not get the 4-peat in the MAC. Instead, it will be Central Michigan narrowly beating Akron. Troy is going to beat Appalachian State 27-20, so Troy wins their second consecutive Sun Belt, I believe. Georgia is also going to win their 3rd SEC championship in this sim. They beat Florida. UAB is going to beat Tulane 40-35, so the UAB Blazers will be likely going to the playoff for the first time as they win their first American title. Colorado State once again wins the Mountain West. This is their 3rd title in 7 years as they beat Nevada. Oregon defends their Big Ten championship. They beat Michigan State this time around. And finally, for the ACC title game, Florida State wins their first ACC championship in this simulation. They beat Miami, and they actually do it pretty convincingly. And this gives us the bracket that you see on your screen, and we actually have multiple Group of 5 teams in the college football playoff this year. UAB gets in as an undefeated team. They're the 3 seed as they're the 3rd highest ranked champion of those conferences. While Tulane also gets in as a wild card. They're going to be a 7 seed, which reminds me, there's actually a 3rd Group of 5 team in here, and that is going to be the Troy Trojans. So 3 Group of 5 teams being represented in this playoff. That is actually going to be a record, but we're certainly going to have to watch out for Georgia and Oregon. I think it's going to be likely one of those 2 teams that's going to win the national championship. And oh, Miami is in here as well. I would be shocked if it's not Georgia, Oregon, or Miami. And in this particular year, I don't think we saw any bowl games that happened that were outside of the college football playoff that were worth covering, but we'll definitely take a quick look to make sure as we're going to go ahead and get things started here. Starting with the first round of college football playoff, NC State is going to be beaten by Illinois 26-21. Florida State loses to Oklahoma, so the Oklahoma Sooners will move on and take on the presumptive #1 overall seed in Georgia. Miami is going to beat Virginia Tech in a battle of ACC teams. And then in a battle of Group of 5 squads, Tulane is going to outlast Troy 38-21 in the Bayou. Now, as for how things went in terms of the quarterfinal, Georgia is able to stop Oklahoma, but they need to put up 50 plus in order to win it somewhat comfortably. UAB is able to beat Illinois, so the Blazers are going to the quarterfinal. However, that will not be the same case for Tulane, who does end up losing to Texas Tech 27-14. And then Oregon also beating Miami 24-20 in the quarterfinal to round out your Final Four. There was, in fact, however, a couple of bowl games that took place outside of college football playoff that were actually worth talking about. North Carolina beat Baylor 21-6. And then the Music City Bowl, Ole Miss was able to beat Penn State 31-17. Now, for the semifinals, Texas Tech is going to stop the Cinderella story of UAB, so the Blazers are not able to complete a perfect season. Georgia able to really demolish Oregon 59-42 ends up being your final score. But as I predicted, Georgia honestly had their easiest game in the national championship game, as they had way too much talent for Texas Tech. Georgia wins very comfortably down in Tampa, Florida, where they will be crowned the 2030 national champions. And this is the second national championship that Georgia has won in this simulation. But as we start on the quest of the 2031 season, we will see if Georgia has what it takes to repeat, as there's going to be a lot of expectations on Georgia this upcoming season. They're ranked number 1 in the preseason poll, so a lot of expectations being placed on this Georgia team for sure. But let's take a look at some other teams that could compete with the Bulldogs this upcoming season. Miami is certainly in here. The Miami Hurricanes have the talent on the roster to pull it off, but it's just a matter of putting it all together, which Miami hasn't done in a few years now. As for other teams to watch out for, Oklahoma seems to have an elite football team, so we could have an interesting battle for the SEC. We'll see if Oklahoma can come out and win their very first SEC championship at the very least. Here's some of the other top 25 teams that are out here in this poll. UAB and Tulane are all in here. These were two teams that made the college football playoff last year. UAB in particular made it all the way to the semifinals. And then there was a couple more teams to talk about. LSU could absolutely be a dark horse. They have the talent to do it. Can their coaching take them far enough? And then Troy sneaking in here in the top 25. They're going to be ranked 25th in the country after making the college football playoff this past season. So we're starting to close out the 2031 season, and for the first time since Dylan Gabriel, Oregon will have a Heisman Trophy winner. Randy Leo out of Oregon threw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns on a way to a very successful season for the Oregon Ducks. As for the other award winners, it was not consensus in terms of who should be the best player in college football this year, though, as we do have a different player named for Player of the Year. Johnny Waiters, the junior redshirt out of Nebraska, actually wins the Player of the Year award over Randy Leo, which I thought was very intriguing. Now, for Head Coach of the Year, though, it does go to Paul White, who has led Nebraska to a very good record, 26-13 overall, and should have the Cornhuskers in the playoffs, actually. Johnny Waiters also ends up winning the best quarterback in college football, with Randy Leo actually finishing in third within his own quarterback group. For Defensive Player of the Year, that's going to go to Shakir Traylor. Traylor, the junior redshirt out of Anna, Texas, ends up being considered the best defensive player in college football this year. as for the best defensive back, Tua Westerman from Sherman Oaks, California, does end up winning and representing very well for the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers, that birthplace of college football. For best running back, that's going to go to Dylan Recru. Dylan Recru, one of the highest overall guys in this file at this point. He's a 96 overall, so you know he's a certified baller. So no surprise he won that best running back of the year. Romeo Lamb does end up winning the best receiver. He's a sophomore at the University of Nebraska. The Lombardi also going to secure Traylor as well. Diego Ariza, who nearly won the Best Quarterback Award, well, he is going to win the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, just barely beating out Dylan Villarreal of Utah State. Best Defensive End also goes to Shakir Traylor. Best interior lineman goes to Garrett Maslowski. Garrett Maslowski is a junior redshirt. Best tight end goes to Larry Talavov. Talavov is going to win it for the Colorado Buffaloes. This is the first time that Colorado has won this Best Tight End award. The Bros Award goes to Ryan Winston, who is an assistant at the University of Colorado. He's 70-38 in his time there as a coordinator. Best linebacker goes to Alani Patuya of Reno, Nevada, and plays for the Oregon Ducks as well. Garrett Mowalski of Nebraska does win the Best Center Award. I think he won another Offensive Lineman Award as well. George Ruiz wins the Lou Groza Award for Best Kicker in college football. Tremaine Breeze wins Best Punter from Nebraska. And the Best Special Teams Returner is Brett Dieter. Brett Dieter is a junior wide receiver from the Ohio State University. Now, as for how conference championships went down in the 2031 season, Mid-Tennessee State does win their third Conference USA title, as they will end up dominating Sam Houston. Miami is going to stop Central Michigan from repeating in the MAC, as Miami wins their first MAC championship in this simulation. Colorado does beat Texas Tech 44-41 in a shootout, and Colorado wins their second Big 12 title game, plus the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. Appalachian State wins their first Sun Belt by narrowly defeating Arkansas State. Missouri is actually going to win the SEC for the first time, as they narrowly take down South Carolina. Now, UAB is going to be Tulane in a close one, so the Blazers are going to once again win the American. They're going to be repeats in that regard. Speaking of repeats, Boise State wins their second Mountain West title game, blowing out Utah State. Nebraska is going to win their first Big Ten championship in this sim. And then NC State is going to actually take down Virginia in the ACC title game. This is the second ACC championship that North Carolina State has won. So this is what your bracket's going to look like for this year, and we do only have one group of 5 team, is what we typically would expect. Appalachian State is going to get in and represent for the Sun Belts. This is the second consecutive year that the Sun Belt has been able to get a team into the college football playoff. And looking at the teams that are in here, I'm definitely keeping my eye on Georgia. Georgia is going to host Washington for the first round of college football playoff. But Colorado, NC State, Nebraska, and Missouri, all 4 of those teams have earned byes into the quarterfinals automatically, with the national championship being in Lucas Oil Stadium. So we'll see how these college football playoffs officially play out. But before I dive into the specific results of the college football playoff, there was a notable bowl game that I did want to talk about. Ohio State played Florida in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and it was actually a barn burner. A very exciting game to watch, but Ohio State was barely able to outclass the Florida Gators. Now, as for how things went down in the college football playoff, it's going to start in that first round, obviously, where Boise State is able to really take care of business against Appalachian State 38-21. Georgia is actually eliminated in the first round. They lose to Washington 29-21, so it opens up the college football playoff field even more. Virginia is able to beat Oregon 38-31, and Texas A&M is narrowly able to beat their fellow Texans in their first round of the playoff, winning 24-20 on the road. Now, as for how things shook out in terms of the quarterfinals, Colorado is able to get revenge on Washington, so Colorado is going to go on to the semifinals. Nebraska, who actually had a bye, they actually beat Miami 27-20. NC State, who also had a bye, is going to beat up on Texas Tech. And then Missouri is going to be the only team that had a bye that is going to lose to Virginia. So the Cavaliers are also going to move on to the quarterfinals. But in the semis, it looks like Nebraska could be making history for the first time in multiple decades, as Nebraska would be 1 game away from winning the national championship. And then Colorado does end up beating Virginia 31-3, being the final score. But in the national championship game, it turns out that Nebraska would indeed make history in the same site that they won the Big Ten championship, as they beat Colorado 42-24 in a battle of teams that used to belong in the Big 12 together. But times have certainly changed, and Nebraska is going to be a national champion for the first time in so many years. But we usher in the start of a brand new college football season, one where we'll see if Nebraska can win the national championship once again. But they're not going to be the number 1 team in the nation to start things out. They actually will start out as number 3 in the nation. Miami, however, is going to be the preseason number 1 team in the nation. So once again, Miami is going to get a ton of hype. However, with that being said, the same could not be said for Georgia. They actually start out down at number 6 in the nation, even though they have one of the best talent rosters in the country. Texas A&M also has that similar level of talent as well within the SEC. So this should be a fun matchup that we could possibly witness. Ohio State, once again, has an extremely strong football team. They're ranked number 9 in the entire country. So Ohio State certainly could make a lot of noise here as well. Oklahoma, again, with an extremely strong roster, but they're going to be in the SEC, which, as we've seen at this point, it is certainly a gauntlet. We do see a little bit of love for the group of 5 at the very bottom, as Boise State is in here, starting the season off ranked number 20 in the entire country. And then Appalachian State, who did make the college football playoff last year as a group of 5 team representing the Sun Belt, they will still be in here, but they're ranked number 24 in the nation in order to start things out. But now we'll go ahead and simulate through the entirety of year number 9 to see what happens. So in concluding the regular season in the 2032 campaign, for the first time in a long time, we actually have somebody on the defensive side of the ball that ends up winning the Heisman Trophy. It's Mario Iglesias from Oregon, a senior defensive end that finished with 20 sacks, so it's definitely much deserved for a historical moment. And of course, Mario Iglesias is also going to win the Player of the Year for the Oregon Ducks in his final year of college eligibility. Head Coach of the Year is actually going to go to Bennett Williamson in his first year at Kansas State. He has the Wildcats undefeated in his first year as the head coach. Meanwhile, Scott O'Malley ends up being the best quarterback in college football this year. He is a senior redshirt for the NC State Wolfpack. Mario Iglesias, of course, also going to win Best Defensive Player of the Year. Best Defensive Back is going to go to a guy from Utah State, David Ornstein. And this is the first time I think we saw a Utah State guy win any major award. The best running back in the country, though, goes to Brian Fayed. Brian Fayed could not get Mid-Tennessee State very far in terms of team success, but his individual success was certainly immense this year. The best receiver also ends up being Julian Robert from Neptune Beach, Florida, also is on that Blue Raiders team. The Lombardi Award obviously is going to go to Mario Iglesias, though, no surprises there. The John Unitas Golden Arm Award will also be provided to Scott O'Malley, who won the Quarterback of the Year award. Best defensive end, yeah, it's going to be Mario Iglesias. We certainly know this. Kamani Vaughn, one of Iglesias' teammates, is going to win Best Interior Lineman. Spencer Finney is going to win the Best Tight End Award. This is the first time the Miami Hurricanes, I believe, have won this certain award. The Burroughs Award goes to Lawrence Proctor, who is a defensive coordinator on the Kansas State staff. Now, for Best Linebacker, that's going to go to an Eastern Carolina guy, Cordell Maggio. This is the first time that we saw Eastern Carolina win a major award as well. Best Center goes to John Jamarco on that Oregon offensive line, and he wins it as a freshman. This is his first true year on the field, so it's scary to see how good this guy could absolutely become. The Luke Rose Award is going to go to James Andreas of Texas Tech. JP Baggs of Cal is going to win the Best Punter, and your Best Returned guy is going to once again be Brent Dietzer, who I believe won the Best Special Teams Returner last season too. But in terms of postseason action, though, Mid-Tennessee State does beat Louisiana Tech 45-20 in order to win their 4th Conference USA championship. They did repeat from last year. Kansas State beats Baylor 43-33, so Kansas State is able to win their 2nd Big Ten title. Miami is able to successfully defend their MAC championship. They beat Akron this time around. Southern Miss beats Appalachian State 42-28, and that's Southern Miss's 3rd Sun Belt championship. Army beats Charlotte 24-6, so Army wins the American for the 2nd time. Fresno State is going to be able to beat Utah State 35-31 to win their 2nd Mountain West title game. Georgia beats Mississippi State in the SEC championship, and this is now the 4th SEC title that Georgia has been able to win in this sim. Oregon is going to once again win the Big Ten. They get their 3rd Big Ten championship against Michigan. And then Virginia is going to win the ACC for the first time since they had the Heisman Trophy winner on their football team. This is their 2nd ACC championship. So for year number 9, this is how things end up shaking out in the bracket. And Army is going to make the college football playoff for the very first time. They get in as a 12 seed, although they're going to likely be cannon fodder to Notre Dame. But listen, Georgia is going to be in here. They made it as one of the best teams in the country, and it was a team that we highlighted as well. They should be the favorites to win it all, in my opinion. But watch out for Oregon. Watch out for Kansas State, especially as they're coming into this thing undefeated. And of course, Virginia could, who knows, maybe make a little bit of noise as well, as they're coming off of a riveting ACC championship. But before we check out how things went down in terms of the college football playoff, we had a couple of bowl games that I definitely wanted to talk about real quick. The Bearcats of Cincinnati are able to beat Georgia Tech in everyone's favorite bowl game. That is the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And then Wake Forest is going to jump into the top 20 after they beat Mississippi State 27-23 in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. Now, as for the college football playoff itself, Nebraska is not going to be able to defend their national championship title as the Wolverines do knock them out in the first round. NC State does beat Colorado, so we'll have 2 new teams in the national championship game. Army is going to narrowly be beaten by Notre Dame 30-28. And then Texas Tech is looking dominant against Missouri. They win by 3 touchdowns on the road. We do also have the Duke's Mayo's Bowl, which actually featured top 15 teams. Baylor does end up winning that by a field goal. But then back to the playoff, Oregon is going to beat NC State. Michigan does move on to the semifinals, so they knock out Georgia, who had a bye. Kansas State does beat Texas Tech in a battle of Big 12 teams. And then Notre Dame is able to beat Virginia in another close one. The Fighting Irish will be moving on to the semifinals. Speaking of that semifinals, though, Kansas State is going to remain undefeated as they take down the Michigan Wolverines. They will meet up with the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, where Notre Dame is able to beat Oregon 42-27. But it will be Kansas State that will barely outlast Notre Dame in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, as the Wildcats are going to claim their first national championship. Now, this was quite a surprise, as you know, Kansas State was not getting a lot of love in the preseason, but they proved the haters wrong, and Kansas State is your national champions in 2032. So with that, season number 10 is officially upon us, and we once again take a look at what those preseason polls are going to look like. So Michigan is actually going to be that number 1 team for the preseason poll, which suggests that we could see a more open race this year. So maybe teams like Oregon has a better shot. Ohio State always has a good shot if they put it all together. Kansas State, who won the national championship this year, getting a lot more respect than this time last year. They're now ranked number 5 in the country to start things out. Notre Dame is very highly regarded. They're a top 10 team this year. Texas Tech, who lost to Kansas State in the college football playoff, they're also going to be a top 10 squad. Of course, you can never forget about the Georgia Bulldogs either. And then down below, we do have a little bit of love for the group of 5. Got 2 teams ranked. Tulane is going to be one of those teams that is going to be ranked at number 21. They're representing the American. And speaking of the American, Army also finds itself here to start things out. And ironically enough, Army has an air raid offense now, which is a lot different than what they started off with. I guess it's working for them though. A couple of dark horses to definitely keep an eye on down here is Wisconsin, who's down here ranked at number 22 in the nation. And of course the Miami Hurricanes, who are ranked 24th in the entire nation. So another season passes us by, and it's another year where a quarterback does not win the Heisman Trophy. This time around, we go back to the offensive side of the ball, as the 2033 Heisman Trophy winner is going to be handed to Julius Shambo, who is a wide receiver at Penn State. The Nittany Lion ball catcher had over 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns on the season. As for other award winners though, Julius Shambo is going to also win the Player of the Year honors. Best head coach is going to go to Darren Kaiser. Darren Kaiser is an elite head coach at this point at Stanford, has built this program up quite nicely out there on the West Coast. Kevin Aguilar, though, is part of the #1 team in the nation, as Kevin Aguilar wins the Best Quarterback Award. Best defensive player goes to a Conference USA guy in Benjamin Pollard, who's from Louisiana Tech. Allen Hooks is going to win the Best Defensive Back Award. He is a free straight safety at USC. Best running back is going to go to Frederick Minshew, and that could suggest that UAB also is going to be part of that college football playoff conversation as well. Oscar Bonita of USC is going to win the Best Receiver, even though Julius Shambo did win Player of the Year and the Heisman Trophy, mind you, but they still went in a different direction. The Lombardi Award is also going to go to Benjamin Pollard of Louisiana Tech. The Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award is going to go to George Vaughn, a quarterback out of Ole Miss. This is different than who ended up winning the Best Quarterback Award. Garrison Warmack wins the Best Defensive End in the country, and he is from Eastern Carolina. Taekwon Bowser wins Best Interior Offensive Lineman this year for the Miami Hurricanes. Caesar Cantrell wins Best Tight End in college football, a very elite player at that 91 overall. Elias Doug, a defensive coordinator for the Stanford Cardinal, does end up winning the Bros Award. Best linebacker goes to Henry Gadish of the Colorado State Rams. Only a sophomore redshirt and getting recognition throughout the country. The best center goes to Tony Kaneda of Miami. He plays that center position, obviously. Lou Groza goes to Kyle Wilkinson of Miami of Ohio, and he is a Cincinnati product, just a sophomore. Blair McCown wins it for Texas A&M for the Best Punter Award. And the Best Special Teams Returner is Julius Shambo. Usually this goes to a reserve type player, but this is someone that also won the Heisman Trophy, so that's very interesting to see just from the standpoint of a guy that simply did it all. But let's go ahead and talk about what we saw in the postseason as we hit the decade mark in this sim. Liberty is going to win the Conference USA Championship once again. This is their third Conference USA title. Central Michigan is going to win the MAC, and this is the second time that they win the MAC. Baylor is going to blow out Oklahoma State, and this is the first Big 12 championship for Baylor in the last 9 seasons. Appalachian State, once again, is going to win the Sun Belt, but they will not return to the college football playoff. UAB, however, will win their third American title, and they will participate in college football playoff in all likelihood. As for Colorado State, they play a little bit of spoiler for Boise State as Colorado State wins their 4th Mountain West title. Georgia continues to dominate the SEC as they win their 5th SEC championship. Miami is going to beat Stanford in the ACC title. It's insane that they're in the same conference, but it is what it is. Miami does win their 2nd ACC championship. And then UCLA is actually going to secure their first Big Ten championship in the school's history. So here are the award winners that we have seen this year, or at least in terms of college football playoff. We do get 3 Group of 5 teams in this year, though. So UAB, Tulane, and Boise State, they all managed to get into the college football playoff, and that's not even including Colorado State, who's also in here as a 4 seed. So definitely a lot of new teams in this field here, and it just gives this feeling that anyone could really win the national championship. I'm very curious to see how this 2033 college football playoff, how does it end up going down? And an interesting thing of note here, the national championship is in Hard Rock Stadium, and the Miami Hurricanes do have the #1 seed, so very possible they could have a de facto home game if they can make it to the national championship. So there's actually no really notable bowl games that I wanted to spend time talking about, so we'll jump right into talking about the playoffs specifically. Nebraska is going to beat USC 39-37. Boise State actually dominates Penn State 42-21, which is a moderate surprise for me, actually. Georgia is going to beat Stanford 34-31. Florida State does beat Tulane 41-39 in order to close out the first round of the college football playoff. Meanwhile, the Miami Hurricanes in the quarterfinals is going to move on as they're able to beat Boise State. UCLA is going to beat Nebraska. This was a battle of Big Ten teams. UAB is going to move on to the semifinals as well as they handle business against Florida State. And then Georgia is able to beat Colorado State 34-13. Now, for the semifinals, UAB is actually going to make it to the national championship, which is the first time that we have actually seen a group of 5 team make it to the biggest stage. Georgia is also going to beat Miami, so the Hurricanes will be robbed of the opportunity to host a national championship game. But Georgia is going to end the feel-good story as UAB simply could not shock the world, so Georgia is going to be able to claim their 3rd national championship in this sim, and they are the only team in this simulation that has more than 1 national championship up to this point. Now, before we jump into season number 11, we do have a little bit of conference realignment happening. So UAB, with what the success that they've had in the American over a longer period of time, as well as making it to the national championship game, UAB does get the invitation to join the ACC, which they do end up accepting. The Big Ten did end up losing some teams because of some other conference realignments that I will get into later, but they do replace some of their losses by adding Toledo, who did end up winning 3 MAC championships so far, and USF going in getting one of the better teams from the American Conference. Because the MAC did end up losing Toledo, they did replace Toledo by adding in UMass, so the MAC does stay at 12 teams. The Mountain West did end up losing a couple of teams because 2 of their better teams did end up joining a revitalized version of the Pac-12 that includes some of the former Pac-12 teams that previously joined the ACC and the Big Ten. Boise State and Colorado State were added to the Pac-12 as well, as they were 2 of the better programs in the Mountain West. And one last thing that we did is that we did end up removing the divisions from the Sun Belt. So let's take a quick look around the country to see where some of these more notable programs stand after 10 years. And we got multiple programs that now have 3 conference championships. Texas Tech, Toledo, for example, they were included in the last update. They still continue to thrive with 3 conference championships apiece. Liberty has 3 Conference USA titles, as well as Southern Miss, UAB from the American Conference, and Oregon. 2 other programs that stand out in particular is Mid-Tennessee State and Colorado State, both from those group of 5 ranks, and they've won 4 conference championships apiece. But early on, the dominant power in college football is the Georgia Bulldogs. Not only have they won the SEC half the time, they've won 5 championships in 10 years, but they're also able to say that they are able to claim 3 national championships alongside that. So Georgia so far looks like the dominant power in this simulation of college football. But now we'll go ahead and get things started here with season number 11. And in season number 11, Miami is listed as the favorite with Georgia getting some love as they're both very talented teams. UAB, who made the transition up to the ACC, they're going to be a preseason number 3 team in the nation, so they're expected to compete in their new conference right away. As for teams also expected to compete right away, Boise State ranked in the top 10, and it just goes to show how much that conference logo can matter. So Boise State very excited about that opportunity to actually compete for a Pac-12 championship. Same with Colorado State. They're going to be ranked in the top 15. They're going to start ranked number 11, but that doesn't mean that there isn't quality group of 5 teams remaining. Tulane is still here, and they're ranked number 12 in the entire nation, so that Tulane could still be a big winner in realignment, going for those big goals there towards the end of the season. And then this is what the rest of the top 25 did end up looking like. So we get through the duration of the 2034 campaign, where once again we see a wide receiver win the Heisman Trophy. It's Jadarius Hunton out of Stanford, and this is the first time in over a decade that the Pac-12 has been able to win a Heisman Trophy, because this is the first year that the Pac-12 is officially back. And that was not all, as Jadarius Hunton will also go on to win Player of the Year, so he was clearly somebody that played well above that 77 overall. However, Tanner Apple out of Mid-Tennessee State is going to end up winning Coach of the Year, as he leads Mid-Tennessee State to a 12-1 record. For best quarterback, that's going to go to Zach Choate of Georgia. He's a senior redshirt and could very well be bound for the NFL. Angelo Galappo ends up winning Best Defensive Player. He is a upperclassman at the University of West Virginia. Logan McBean ends up winning the Best Defensive Back in the country. He is a corner for the Ole Miss Rebels, the current number 1 team in the nation. The Best Running Back goes to Clay Lopper, another win for the Pac-12, as Washington has recently moved back to the Pac-12. The Best Receiver, of course, is going to go to Jadarius Hunton. Angelo Galappo also wins the Lombardi Award. The John Unitas Golden Arm goes to Zach Choate, who also won Best Quarterback. Best Defensive End goes to Angelo Galappo as well. Best Interior Lineman goes to Earl Johansson out of Oregon, another win for the Pac-12 Conference as a whole. Best Tight End goes to Gideon Odom from Michigan. He's going to be a junior redshirt this year. Luke Murray ends up winning the Broyles Award for Best Assistant. He's a defensive coordinator for the Blue Raiders. Best Linebacker goes to Nick Brown, who is also a part of that Blue Raiders team. Best Center goes to John DeMarco, who I believe won this Best Center award just this past season. The Lou Groza goes to Carl Hale, part of the Pac-12 with the California Bears. Best Punter also is going to remain in the Pac-12 with Deion Penny of USC. And the Best Special Teams person ends up being Ty Wilson. Ty Wilson was a wide receiver on the TCU Horned Frogs. So with that being said, this is how the conference championships ended up playing out. Pac-12 did not have a conference championship game. We're the only conference to do that, but we're going to try to change that in the offseason. UTEP does win the Conference USA for the first time as they beat Mid-Tennessee State, ruining any chance for the Blue Raiders to make the college football playoff. West Virginia does win the Big 12 for the first time as they beat Oklahoma State. UMass, in their first year in the MAC, is actually going to win the MAC. They beat Western Michigan. Appalachian State beats Southern Mississippi as App State is able to claim their third Sun Belt title. Tulsa does win the American for the very first time. They are early winners of the Power Vacuum from the American. Fresno State also is going to take advantage as they win their third Mountain West title against Nevada. Ole Miss is going to win the SEC, and they're going to also be the 1 seed in college football playoff, while Texas A&M will be in at 5. Nebraska is narrowly going to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, and as such, they will claim their second Big Ten title. And then North Carolina is going to beat Clemson 28-14 as North Carolina claims their first ACC title. But it looks like the Pac-12 could not really, they didn't really play conference games against each other, which is really interesting. So I don't know if this is a bug, like in the Pac-12 or what was going on here. Definitely going to have to take a closer look, but it seems like every team in the Pac-12 did at least finish with a winning record. So in the first year in the existence of the Pac-12, though, we do end up seeing that they do end up winning get free teams in for the college football playoff. Cal, Washington, and USC were all able to get into the college football playoff from the Pac-12. That being said, there was still a group of 5 team that was able to get in, and that is Appalachian State, who did end up winning the Sun Belt. So even though there is a new conference that is around, there's still opportunities for group of 5 schools to get into the college football playoff, even though App State is not even ranked in the top 25, which is interesting to me. So we did have a couple of fun bowl games that we had a chance to tune into before the playoffs even got into full swing. Alabama, for example, took on Maryland, and Alabama was able to outlast Maryland in a shootout as they're going to be champions of the Cheez-It Bowl. The Bahamas Bowl took 2 ranked teams as Southern Miss is going to beat Mid-Tennessee State, 34-10 being your final score. And then in the Boca Raton Bowl, which took place in Florida, Miami is just barely, and I mean barely, able to outlast Tulane 43-41. Now, in terms of the college football playoff, we do see Florida State beat Clemson 41-38. LSU is able to beat Notre Dame to get into the quarterfinal. Appalachian State is able to pull the upset off against Texas A&M, which I'm sure Texas A&M fans are actually familiar with. And then in a battle of Pac-12 schools, USC is actually able to dominate against Washington. Meanwhile, in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, Nebraska is able to beat Appalachian State by 10. LSU is going to beat Ole Miss by a field goal. Florida State will dominate against North Carolina. And USC will beat Cal 28-23. So in the quarterfinals, Florida State is able to win against USC, and they won so pretty comfortably. Nebraska is also going to be able to beat LSU 31-23. But in a game that took place in SoFi Stadium this year, the national championship was a nail-biter, but Nebraska is able to outlast Florida State. And so for the second time, Nebraska is going to be your national champion. They're winners of 2034, and Nebraska will win their second national championship in the last 4 years. Alright, so I was able to go into conference realignment and make sure that the Pac-12 1 has an actual title game, and then also to go with that as well, make sure that, hey, we do in fact have actual conference games being played. So hopefully that's fixed up in this in year number 12. Florida State, however, is going to be your number 1 ranked team in the nation. Florida State, after nearly winning the national championship, they are getting considerably more love this year as the number 1 team in the nation. So could be plenty of teams out there that have a legitimate shot of winning it all. Ole Miss is certainly one of those teams, as is Oregon, Washington, and we can't count out Nebraska, who just won the national championship this past season. In other news, LSU seems to be one of the top teams in the country at that 91 overall, so LSU will be looking to be extremely dangerous this upcoming season, as is Notre Dame, who's here in the top 10. Texas A&M also coming with a pretty strong team as they field one of the best rosters in the country at number 12 in the nation. Clemson also looking to get back to being on top of the ACC as Clemson comes in at number 13. Miami looks to be a top dog as well, as Miami wants to show that they can win more than one national championship. Alabama is still hanging around. They're still ranked in the top 20. A little bit of love for the independents as well, as Tulane is going to be the best group of 5 team in here at number 19 in the country. UConn is an independent school, and they start out as a top 20 school. Could they sneak into the college football playoff this year? Or will teams like Boise State, who is considered a dark horse, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, or Georgia barely hanging into the top 25 at this point, can one of these teams play as a serious dark horse? So plenty of teams in here that could make it into the playoff this year and make a deep run. So I actually did not get the Heisman Trophy graphic for this time around, but Deion Meekins is going to go on to win the Heisman Trophy, and he is a sophomore wide receiver from LSU. But also with the other award winners, it would make sense that Deion Meekins would win the Heisman Trophy, because he also happens to be your winner for the Player of the Year award as well. Head Coach of the Year is going to go to Eric Ewing, the head coach at Troy. This is his first year at Troy, and he ends up finishing with an 11-2 record. Best quarterback in the country goes to Jarius Lemire out of Auburn. He is a senior redshirt. Best defensive player is a Liberty football player by the name of Alexander Wood, who played on the defensive end. For best defensive back in the country, that will be provided to DeAndre Dingle, the junior corner out of Baylor. For best running back in the country, that goes to Cameron Brodeen, the junior out of Florida State. At wide receiver, Deion Meekins ends up winning the best receiver in all of college football. The Lombardi Award also ends up going to Alexander Wood. He ends up being a defensive lineman of the year. For the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm, it will be Darren Focha out of North Carolina. He's able to narrowly beat out Jarius Lemire. As for best defensive end, Alexander Wood is going to be able to win the best defensive end in college football. Javonte Stubbs wins best interior lineman for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. He's a Lincoln, Nebraska product, so hometown kid. Sidney Brents wins the best tight end award for the Kansas State Wildcats. The Bros Award goes to the best assistant, and that is Mac McChristopher. That is a heck of a name, by the way. And he was the defensive coordinator for the Troy Trojans. For best linebacker is going to be Lee Pace out of Texas Tech. Best center goes to Javonte Stubbs out of the University of Nebraska. The Luke Rose Award goes to Jeff Doxson. Jeff Doxson is going to be the best kicker in all of college football. Cordell Livings wins the Best Punter Award for Alabama. And rounding out your awards is Carl Guy, who is a wide receiver at Stanford, who wins as the Best Special Teams Returner in college athletics. But we were able to get a Pac-12 championship game this year, so this is the first time that we had 10 conference championship games in over a decade. Liberty is going to win the Conference USA, and that will give Liberty their fourth Conference USA title. Stanford is going to win the first Pac-12 title game in the last 12 years, beating USC in a nail-biter. Kansas State will beat Texas Tech, as Kansas State will claim their third Big 12 championship. UMass might actually be the new dominant force in the MAC, though, as the Minutemen are able to win their second consecutive MAC championship. Troy is going to beat Arkansas State by a shred, by a very small margin. Troy's going to win their third Sun Belt. Get a battle of the Iron Bowl in the SEC championship, though, as Alabama does win his second SEC title. Army is going to beat Florida Atlantic, so Army is going to win their third American title game. UNLV is also going to win their very first Mountain West title game in this sim as they beat Wyoming. North Carolina is going to be able to take down Florida State as the Tar Heels are able to win their second consecutive ACC championship. Michigan will end up beating Nebraska as the Wolverines are able to claim their third Big Ten championship. Which does lead us to what the college football playoff bracket would look like here in 2035. Now, because we have now 5 major power conference champions, this is the first time that we do end up seeing the group of 5 left out completely. This national championship is going to take place in NRG Stadium, and Alabama does get the number 1 overall seed, with Stanford, North Carolina, and Michigan able to get buys as well. And then you see that once again we do end up seeing 4 Pac-12 teams actually make it into the college football playoff this year, the Pac-12 is becoming the most dominant conference in all of college football. We'll see if the Pac-12 can bring home a national championship, though. But before we go into the details of the college football playoff, though, I wanted to take some time to look at a couple of notable bowl games first. Troy and Liberty played in a battle of top 20 teams, and Troy was able to really dominate in the Bahamas Bowl against the Liberty Flames. And then UConn did finish the year ranked in the top 25 once again, but they did end up losing in the Birmingham Bowl 34-14. In the meantime, we do end up seeing that in the Taxslayer Gator Bowl, UAB does finish the season ranked, which is the first time that I believe that they did that since going to the ACC. They're able to beat Arkansas 31-21. Now, as for how the college football playoff matches ended up going, Washington was able to beat USC, and that's going to be a battle between two Pac-12 schools. Georgia is going to be able to take down Oregon 31-25. Kansas State is able to dominate against the Big Ten champs in Nebraska. And then Auburn is going to fall to Florida State in a nail-biter. Meanwhile, in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, we saw an absolute classic in Kansas State, narrowly able to beat Michigan 53-51. Georgia is going to narrowly beat Alabama in a battle of two SEC teams. North Carolina is going to dominate against Washington, and then Stanford is going to beat Florida State in order to move on to the semifinals. Now, in the semifinals, though, Stanford will keep that momentum rolling by beating North Carolina, and Georgia will actually win a nail-biter against Kansas State as well. But in the national championship game, we do see that Georgia's dominance is going to continue, as they will now be able to say they can claim their fourth national championship in the last 12 years, as Georgia is going to beat Stanford 42-21. Alright, boys, so that gets us into the 2036 season now. Let's see what the landscape of college football is looking like, starting with these top 25 preseason polls. Now, once again, as Georgia is the dominant power in the nation, they are the preseason #1 team in the nation, and really that $1 million question at this point is, who can hang with the Georgia Bulldogs? Because I'm looking at some of these other teams, and it looks like no matter who I'm looking at, to be honest with you, with very few exceptions out there, there is not really anyone else that could really compete with the Georgia Bulldogs, if we're being honest with ourselves. But with that being said, we do have a little bit of love. Liberty out of Conference USA is ranked in the top 25, and then we did also see that UConn was ranked number 16 in the country, and they actually have a really good football team as well. So maybe UConn could mess around and make a college football playoff. We'll just have to wait and see what the final season results are. Alright, boys, so we are getting towards the end of the 2036 season, and we are closing in on another Heisman Trophy. This one's going to be handed out to Austin Sokol, the senior quarterback out of the University of Georgia, which suggests that Georgia is continuing its torrent run. As for the other awards here in the 2036 season, Austin Sokol is going to also win the Player of the Year award. Best head coach is actually going to go to Chris Cooper, is going to help Georgia Tech possibly make the college football playoff. They will have a very high seed. Best quarterback is going to also be Austin Sokol. Best defensive player goes to Dalton Van Dink of Michigan. He is a senior redshirt in his final year of eligibility. Best defensive back is Byron Chick, the sophomore redshirt out of South Alabama. Shouting out the Jaguars there for sure. For best running back, that's going to be Cameron Brodeen, the senior out of Florida State. David Gooch of Cincinnati almost won it. DeMar Fenward, the best receiver in Stanford's history. He's certainly up there. He's a sophomore redshirt and is going to be the best receiver in college football this season. Lombardi Award is also going to go to Dalton Van Dink of Michigan. The John Unitas Golden Arm Award is going to go to Austin Sokol. For best defensive end, Dalton Van Dink is also going to bring that particular award home. Josh Huerta is going to be the best interior lineman protecting Austin Sokol. He's a junior redshirt. Max Booker, the Kansas State tight end, is going to win the best tight end in college football this year. He's also a senior. The Boros Award goes to Robert Everett, the offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. And the defensive coordinator was very close to winning it as well. For the best linebacker, it's going to be Pascal Armour, the junior redshirt out of UMass. So the Minutemen able to get a major award winner for the very first time. The best center goes to Prince Olarie, the sophomore redshirt out of Georgia. The Luke Rose Award goes to Greg Beauplan of Texas Tech. Frank Watts wins the best punter for Florida State. And the best returnman in college football is Josh Brooks, the sophomore running back for the Purdue Boilermakers. Was truly a difference maker. Alright, so here we are in season number 13, continuing what we saw in this particular season. Liberty does win the Conference USA, and that is going to be Liberty's 5th Conference USA championship in this sim. Stanford is going to repeat as Pac-12 champions. Texas Tech is going to beat Kansas State, so the Red Raiders win their 4th Big 12 championship. UMass continues to get on a roll. They win their 3rd consecutive MAC title. James Madison wins the Sun Belt for the very first time. They beat UL Monroe. Army does end up beating Eastern Carolina, so Army does win the American for the 4th time. Hawaii is going to beat Utah State, so the Rainbow Warriors win the Mountain West for the very first time in this sim. Georgia is going to win yet another SEC championship. This is their 6th SEC title in 13 years. Michigan is going to win against Illinois, so Michigan does win the Big Ten for the 4th time. And then Florida State was in a close one with Georgia Tech, but the Seminoles are going to be able to win it out and secure their 2nd ACC title. And this is what the bracket is going to look like, and it looks like Georgia is going to get a bye into the quarterfinals. Looks like they are, however, going to give Stanford the number 1 seed. They are the highest ranked conference champion in the 2036 college football playoff. Notre Dame, however, ends up being your number 1 team in the country with a 9-3 record. We do end up seeing Boise State get in. Boise State a part of that Pac-12 alongside Stanford, USC, and Oregon. So the Pac-12 continues to secure tickets into the playoff as they secure 4 such bids, more than any other conference in college football. But even though the college football playoff is the most important thing, at the same time though, we still had a couple of pretty good bowl games that I definitely want to bring to your attention. North Carolina played Army in the Fenway Bowl, and it was a battle of top 25 teams that North Carolina was narrowly able to beat out. They beat the champions of the American doing that. Then a couple of ranked matchups in the next week of bowl season, as Missouri is going to beat SMU, and then Kansas State is going to beat Clemson in the Duke's Mellow Bowl in what was a very exciting game to watch. But looking into the college football playoff, and Florida State is going to beat Georgia Tech by a couple of touchdowns. Oregon is going to beat fellow Pac-12 opponent in Los Angeles. The number 1 seed in Notre Dame actually loses in the first round to NC State. Meanwhile, Illinois is able to win a close game against Boise State. As for the quarterfinals, Stanford is going to win against USC in a shootout. Georgia moves on to the semifinals as well, as they'll beat Florida State. Texas Tech does beat Illinois, and then NC State continues its run from the first round as they beat Michigan, who was on a bye for this playoff. Meanwhile, in the semifinals, Texas Tech is going to be able to shock Georgia and win pretty convincingly. NC State, however, had to struggle a little bit more as they only beat Stanford by less than 1 possession. However, it is the Wolfpack of NC State that is able to come out on top and win their very first national championship in this sim, as they won all of their games by 1 possession, but they came out on top in Arlington, Texas, which is the biggest thing that matters at the end of the day. But that being said, Notre Dame, even though they lost very disappointingly in the college football playoff, they will get some extra love as the Fighting Irish will come out and they will be the #1 team here in the preseason. So, you know, that was a little bit of a surprise to me, but maybe Notre Dame's going to come out with a vengeance. NC State, who won the national championship last year, does at least start out in the top 5. I just burped that sexy. Georgia, like always, does have one of the best talent rosters in the country. They have a 91 overall team, so probably going to be a heavy favorite here once again. Oregon's got a really good squad. They're an 89 overall squad. Boise State could mess around and make some noise as well. They've really done well adjusting to life in the Pac-12. Texas Tech also made a deep run, so definitely got to watch out for the Red Raiders. Florida State also in the top 10. Florida State made the playoff last year. Michigan made a solid run in the playoff, but did disappointingly fell in the quarterfinals. Missouri has a solid football team on its hands, so definitely have to watch out for the Tigers. Washington, also a part of that gauntlet from the Pac-12. Could see them getting busy with it yet again. Who else do we have here? Clemson is in here. They're ranked, you know, pretty highly regarded. Could be a dark horse from the ACC. Wisconsin could certainly be considered a dark horse as well. And then at the very last spot is the Cincinnati Bearcats, who get the final spot, ranked number 25 in the country. So navigating through the 2037 season, and Johnny Schugertz, he was unguardable. Johnny Schugertz ends up winning the Heisman Trophy, had 1,200 yards receiving, but 23 touchdowns. Like I said, he was literally unguardable. Johnny Schugertz, of course, would also go on to win the Player of the Year award. Dennis Swan, also in the state of Ohio, but at a different school, he actually ends up winning the Best Head Coach of the Year. Has Miami of Ohio rolling around pretty well, 20-6 being that record. Darren Proctor, the quarterback from Stanford, does end up winning the Best Quarterback award. Sharif Kimball of Utah State wins Best Defensive Player. Jesus Guzman wins Best Defensive Back, otherwise known as the Jim Forte Award. He's from Texas Tech. Best Running Back goes to Mario Hankins of LSU. Johnny Schugertz, of course, also wins the Biletnikoff. Sharif Kimball wins the Lombardi Award, as well as the Best Defensive Player of the Year. The Johnny Unitas Golden Arm going to a different quarterback, though. They are going to hand it to the Appalachian State product, Alex Naylor of Appalachian State. Quishon Brown from Alabama wins the Best Defensive End Award. Different from another defensive end that we showed earlier. I can't remember off the top of my head who that is. Might have been this DeMarcus Willett, but I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. Best interior lineman does go to Ryan Hurley, the sophomore out of Alabama. Best tight end goes to Paul Sharifing of Ole Miss. Barry McCargo out of Georgia Tech wins the Broyles Award. Best linebacker does go to James Alexander. Best center goes to Tyrese McNick. John Blasange of Jacksonville State wins the Lou Groza Award, which is the kicker of the year. And Timmy Kaiser wins the best punter from Penn State, with the special teams returner of the year going to James Logg, a senior wide receiver out of Georgia Tech. Now, in terms of what we saw with the conference championship games, we did end up seeing Louisiana Tech. They actually claimed their first Conference USA title. They narrowly beat out Jacksonville State, who won the Conference USA back in season number 1. Stanford continues its run, though. They beat Cal 35-25. That's their third consecutive Pac-12 title. Oklahoma State is able to claim their first Big 12 championship. They beat Texas Tech, who won it last year. UMass could not four-peat, as they don't even make it to the MAC championship. Miami does, however, and wins their third over Akron. Appalachian State wins the Sun Belt for the 4th time. They dominate against Troy. Alabama does end up winning the SEC. This is the 3rd time that Alabama has won the SEC. Tulane does win the American for the very first time. Nevada also is going to be able to win the Mountain West for the first time since, I believe, season number 2. Ohio State still looking for their first Big Ten championship, but they lose big to Penn State. And then NC State is able to once again win the ACC. They narrowly defeat Georgia Tech. In the Alamo Bowl, meanwhile, we had a couple of good bowl games happen. But first and foremost, Cincinnati is able to win the Alamo Bowl. They narrowly beat Maryland 31-15. That does end up being your final score in that particular matchup. But that was the only notable bowl game that we saw. And that was because most of the action did lie in the college football playoff. Now, that being said, we did actually see UConn make the college football playoff for the very first time. Miami was also in there as a first-timer as well. So not as many Pac-12 teams as what we normally would see. Only saw a couple this time around, but it was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who was the #1 team in the nation going into the playoff last year. They get themselves some revenge, and they go all the way to the national championship and find a way to win it. So Notre Dame does end up being your national champs here in 2037. And Notre Dame will have heavy expectations going into year number 15 in this sim, this 30-year sim that we have, because Notre Dame's going to start off as your #1 team in America here in the preseason poll. So a lot of expectations for Notre Dame to try and repeat. Certainly some interesting things on here as well, though. Missouri, who has made it to national championship game, they're #2 in the country. Alabama, who won the SEC, is ranked #3. Florida State's got a good squad, and then UConn's got a really good team as well, and getting a ton of respect for it. They're ranked #5 in the entire country, which is wild to me. It just seems like it's going to be more of an open race for the national championship this year, as Ole Miss got a really good squad for this upcoming season. That team up north's got some guys that can certainly make a difference as well. Washington, of course, can't be counted out. Ohio State has got a squad. It's just they got to put it together on the field. I'm surprised at how quiet Ohio State has been in this particular sim. That's actually wild to me, if we're going to be honest with you. But LSU and Penn State, they're ranked pretty highly. Penn State looking to defend that Big Ten title. UCLA looking to make a difference in the Pac-12 as well. Tennessee ranked at 18. Texas Tech at 19. Georgia down here at number 20, so they might have fallen on some slightly hard times, but don't really see any group of 5 teams other than UConn in here, as Oregon and Maryland are going to wrap up your top 25. Alright guys, so I think from here on out, what I am going to do though is I'm going to just show who the Heisman Trophy winner is, simply because we are well past the point to where you would recognize like any of the guys. So the Heisman Trophy winner does end up being Trey Cole. He's a sophomore wide receiver at Stanford and put up similar numbers than the wide receiver that we saw from Ohio State that won the Heisman Trophy last year, except might have been a tad better. 1,300 yards and 24 touchdowns, both better than last year's Heisman Trophy winner. Meanwhile, in the postseason, we do end up seeing Liberty. Liberty does end up winning another Conference USA title. This is their 6th Conference USA title that they can actually claim. USC, meanwhile, does end the reign of the Stanford Cardinal, and because of that, USC is able to claim their first Pac-12 championship since the revival of said Pac-12. Texas Tech does end up going ahead, and they beat Oklahoma State to claim their 5th Big 12 championship. Bowling Green is able to beat Miami, and this is the first time that BG has won the MAC ever since starting this sim. Appalachian State beats Old Dominion 27-7, and this will be their 5th Sun Belt title. Oklahoma is going to be able to claim its first SEC title against Ole Miss. Tulane once again winning the American, and this is the 2nd year in a row that the Green Wave have won the American Championship. Utah State, however, is going to pull the upset off against San Diego State, and this is the first time in 15 years that Utah State has won the Mountain West. Toledo is able to beat Penn State in the Big Ten Championship, which is absolutely wild. So Toledo is able to win a Big Ten championship in this sim before Ohio State, which convinces me that the sim gods really did Ohio State dirty. Florida State is going to wrap out conference championships by beating Clemson. Now, we did see a pretty crazy game happen in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, where North Carolina is able to beat Kansas State in an absolutely complete shootout, which has been a fun one to watch. And then the Las Vegas Bowl was also interesting as well, where we saw Oklahoma State narrowly pull it off against the Michigan Wolverines. But once again, North Carolina State is going to come out here and win a national championship. They did not win the ACC, or at least that was not what we saw there. But that being said, North Carolina is able to make through all 3 rounds. They beat Texas A&M, beat Oklahoma, and then beat Clemson before beating Penn State to win that national championship down in Raymond James Stadium. Do want to shout out the Tulane Green Wave, who are able to make this college football playoff from the American Conference, and they were even able to win a game against Stanford before falling short against USC. But for the second time in the last 3 years, the North Carolina State Wolfpack are going to be able to win the national championship. Alright guys, so here we are at the 15-year mark, and here's how things have shaken out now. So wanted to highlight 2 programs in particular. Liberty has shown that they are indeed one of the best group of 5 programs in college football. They lead all of the group of 5 teams in terms of conference championships, as Liberty has been able to lay claim to 6 Conference USA championships, while Georgia continues to show it's not only one of the best programs in the SEC, but certainly the top program in the country as well. Because even though they've only been able to claim 1 SEC title in the last 5 seasons, they're also able to claim another national championship. So 4 national championships in 15 years. That leads everybody else in college football right about now. Alright boys, so we made it officially to the halfway point, and I'm going to try to speed things up here in the second half a little bit in retrospect, so this is future me talking, but we're going to jump into season 16 here, and I think for the first time we do have Oklahoma getting some love as the #1 team in America, at least to start things out here in the preseason. But I'm sure there's going to be a couple of other teams that are going to be out there that are going to want to compete against, the Oklahoma Sooners. This might be one of the best teams that they fielded, though, so I'm very excited to see how things end up shaking out. Ohio State is going to be a dark horse to definitely keep an eye on, as they're ranked number 16 in the country, but do have one of the best talent rosters in the entire country, so certainly can't sweep on them. Tulane has one of the better group of 5 teams in the nation. They come in ranked number 19 in the entire country as well. We do also see Georgia still down here at number 24 in the nation. And then Eastern Carolina also getting some love in the American. So 2 American teams being represented in this top 25. Let's go ahead and simulate in terms of what we got going on in terms of year 16. Alright boys, so we do get an update on who's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner here in year 16, and Lloyd Folk, the junior quarterback out of North Carolina, is actually going to win it. Lloyd Folk threw for over 4,100 yards and 50 touchdown passes, and he's not even done with his season yet, which is the craziest part in all of this. And that Heisman Trophy winner was able to lead North Carolina to the ACC championship game, where the Tar Heels were able to easily take down Florida State. In terms of other conference championship games, though, Maryland was able to beat Iowa, so the Terrapins are able to claim their first Big Ten title. Utah State is going to beat Wyoming by a field goal, so that does mean that Utah State is going to claim their 3rd Mountain West championship. Tulane is going to once again win the American. They have certainly been on a roll. Oklahoma is going to beat Auburn 32-18, and that means Oklahoma will once again be able to defend their SEC title. Georgia Southern wins the Sun Belt for the very first time. Bowling Green is going to win their 2nd consecutive MAC championship. Arizona wins the Big 12 for the first time against UCF. UCLA also winning the Pac-12 for the first time since the conference was revived. And Liberty continues to show they are one of the best teams in the group of 5. In terms of consistency, the Flames now have 7 Conference USA championships in this sim. Now, here's what the college football playoff bracket broke down for this year, and not only do we see a group of 5 team make it into the playoff once again, but we do end up seeing that Tulane Green Wave team actually get a bye into the quarterfinals. They're the 4th ranked team in the nation and earned the free seed because of that. North Carolina does get the top seed, which we are not surprised about at all. Oklahoma, who we did end up identifying as the preseason number 1 team in the nation, they live up to those expectations, won the SEC of course, and they come in as a 2 seed, and I imagine the Oklahoma Sooners will come in as the odds-on favorite to win the national championship in 2039. But before we go see the results of the college football playoff, though, I do want to point out at least one bowl game. Wyoming and Appalachian State met as 2 of the better group of 5 teams in the country. It was an exciting Hawaii Bowl matchup, one where Wyoming was able to come out on top against Appalachian State, 23-17. But it looks like we are going to experience some deja vu, as once again NC State is going to win the national championship. They win their 2nd national title in the last couple of years. They do so in a series of mostly close games here. The only game that NC State played in that was not more than 1 possession was the Oregon game in the semifinals. That was in the Cotton Bowl, but they could have lost to Stanford, they could have lost to Tulane, they certainly could have lost to Iowa, who made it to the Big Ten all the way to the national championship game, mind you, and it was really close. But NC State, for the 2nd time in this sim, is going to be your champions. But on to year 17 we go, and this time Oregon, who did make it to the semifinals in the previous college football playoff, they are your preseason number 1 team in the nation. NC State, who I actually look back at my notes, they actually won 3 of the last 4 national championships, which is wild to me, ends up being here as your number 2 ranked team in the country here in the preseason poll. Couple of other teams to certainly keep an eye out though. Oklahoma, they definitely disappointed last year, but they are looking to come back with an absolute vengeance. UCLA could have a team that could certainly make some noise, as does the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Florida State's got some guys as well, so they're definitely one to keep an eye on. Iowa almost won the national championship. They were very close, but maybe not as much of a factor this year though. However, the same could not be said for Clemson, who certainly could have plenty to say, at least within the ACC for sure. Auburn has one of the better teams that they've fielded in this sim, and they're going to be coming in as an 87 overall. The Michigan Wolverines aren't looking too shabby either. Tulane once again comes in as one of the highest group of 5 teams in the entire country, but they're not the only group of 5 team in this top 25 initially. More on that in a second. Maryland could be a dark horse within the Big Ten. They did win the Big Ten championship last year. Louisville's certainly got some dudes on that roster. Ole Miss has a very strong team. They could be a serious dark horse at number 20. But Louisiana Tech, man, this is the first time we've seen Louisiana Tech ranked. And they're going to be looking to definitely get that 2nd Conference USA championship title. We'll see if they can accomplish that. And then rounding out your group, you got teams like Oklahoma State, Penn State, UCF, and Nebraska as your final team that could certainly make things interesting in the back end of the season. Let's go ahead and sim to the end of year number 17, though, to see what ends up shaking out. Alright boys, so we made it through the majority of the 2040 season, and we do return to seeing a wide receiver holding that Heisman Trophy. David Jewell, a sophomore wide receiver from the University of Oregon, he goes off, scoring a touchdown on 1 every 4 catches, and he actually caught for over 1,200 yards as well. You want to talk about a guy who was unguardable, he certainly fits that bill. So it's easy to see why Oregon not only was able to win the Pac-12 championship, but also get the #1 overall seed in the college football playoff as well. So the Oregon Ducks could be a team that seriously could win its first national championship in a long time. As for the other conference championship games, Mid-Tennessee State was able to beat Liberty, so the Blue Raiders are able to claim their 5th Conference USA title. Texas Tech continues to be a dominant force in the Big 12 as they win their 6th Big 12 championship in this sim. Akron is able to beat UMass in a surprising upset as Akron wins their MAC championship in almost 20 years. Texas State is going to beat Georgia Southern by a pretty healthy margin, and Texas State is also going to be able to win their first Sun Belt title in a couple of decades. Army is going to beat North Texas pretty comfortably as Army claims their 5th American Conference title. Georgia is back winning the SEC. They win their 7th SEC crown. The Wyoming Cowboys win the Mountain West for the very first time in this sim. Michigan takes on USF, who we included in the last round of conference realignment. Wolverines do still end up winning, but shout out to the Bulls though. And then the Florida State Seminoles do end up securing their 4th ACC title against their hated rivals. So this is what the college football playoff bracket is going to look like going into the 2040 postseason. We got a lot of teams here. Lots of teams here. We do see Wyoming secure their first appearance into the college football playoff. They're going to be representing for the Mountain West. Oregon, who's got the Heisman Trophy winner and is undefeated as well. They will have a #1 seed in the Pac-12. A couple of other teams from the Pac-12 that are in here is Washington and USC. The only other school that I saw have like 3 teams in the same conference is the SEC actually, as Georgia, Ole Miss, and Missouri do end up getting in from the SEC. Should be a fun college football playoff. The national championship is in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so if Georgia can make it to the national championship game, they could have a de facto home game in their final, the most important game of the season. But let's go ahead and see how these playoffs shake out, as well as check for any notable bowl games. Alright boys, so before we report in on who won the national championship here in year 17, we do have a couple of notable bowl games. NC State, who won the national championship last year, they did not make it into the college football playoff, but they do finish this year strong at the very least, as they're able to beat down Army 37-19 in the Boca Raton Bowl. And then we had a fun matchup in the Click Lane Bowl as well between Iowa and UMass. The Minutemen finished with a 10-win season but cannot finish strong, as they could not close the deal out against the Iowa Hawkeyes, who were also in a national championship last year. And that national championship, for the very first time, is going to belong to the Ole Miss Rebels. The Rebels are able to win their first national championship in this series here in 2040. So a fun one here for sure, as they're able to start off by beating Wyoming at home. Then they went to the Cotton Bowl and beat Georgia, following that up with a 7-point victory in the Peach Bowl. And then in the national championship, Ole Miss was able to take down Florida State, who did have a bye, and the Florida State Seminoles are going to fall just short, which means Ole Miss will be your national champs for the first time. So the march goes on as we now prepare for the 2041 season. And in the 2041 season, what we do end up seeing is that Oregon is the preseason #1 team in America, but the team that actually won the national championship last year is going to be right behind them. They're going to start the season off ranked #2 in the entire country. Few other teams of note that I do want to point out could have some serious chances of winning the national championship this year is Florida State, who comes in at #4, Washington, who comes in at #5, and this is the 3rd Pac-12 team in the top 5, so we hardly scrolled down this list by any means. Texas Tech is right behind them. Georgia, we know about Georgia. They have one of the best rosters in the country as always. Missouri's got a good squad here. Missouri made the playoff last year, I believe. Huge expectations for UConn. They're in the top 10. Oklahoma State is, however, going to wrap up that top 10. As for Utah, Utah is looking to make some noise in the Big 12. We haven't seen them win the Big 12 in a while, so we'll see if they can change course here. Wisconsin looking to win their third Big 10 championship as well. Penn State always has a pretty good football team out there in Happy Valley, as does Clemson in one of the Death Valleys in America. Miami, of course, looking to revive the Deep South. Michigan looking to win their 6th Big 10 championship in this simulation. Alabama is going to be considered a dark horse. Army is actually one of the best group of 5 teams in the country, and that is alongside Wyoming. Wyoming looking to get back to the college football playoff. And rounding out your group is Iowa and the LSU Tigers, who in my opinion certainly should be a dark horse as well. Alright boys, so the 2041 season comes to a close, and this one was a little bit of a surprise here. The Heisman Trophy winner goes to Larry Shepley. He didn't even have 1,000 receiving yards, which is a little bit crazy to think about, to be honest with you. He did have 14 touchdowns, but to be honest with you, for me, this is one of the less underwhelming Heisman Trophy winners that we have seen so far. But we do end up seeing Ohio State actually win a Big Ten championship. It almost took 2 decades to do it, but Ohio State was actually able to win a Big Ten championship for once, so at least there's that. In other words, we have Florida State, who won the ACC. Once again, they dominate against Clemson. Utah State is able to beat Nevada, so the Utah State Aggies are able to win their 4th Mountain West title. Rice don't want to ever mess with food, and Rice is going to show why, because Rice wins their 1st American title. Oklahoma does beat Georgia in the SEC championship, so Oklahoma does get to play spoiler. Georgia Southern beats Appalachian State, so Georgia Southern wins their 2nd consecutive Sun Belt. Western Michigan. This is the first time we've seen Western Michigan win the MAC, and they do it against Bowling Green. Kansas State does beat Colorado, so the Wildcats of Kansas State get their 4th Big 12 title. UCLA, once again, does end up winning the Pac-12. This is their 2nd time in 3 years. And then Louisiana Tech does end up winning their 2nd Conference USA championship here in this simulation. Now, with that being said, this was actually one of the more entertaining bowl seasons that we got to witness, even without even considering the college football playoff. We had this Boca Raton Bowl that was between 2 top 25 teams, and Tulane was actually able to dominate against Miami, so that's a shocker for sure. Penn State was actually in a close one with Western Michigan, and the Broncos had a fantastic season, just couldn't get it done in the Quick Lane Bowl necessarily. And then my Cincinnati Bearcats were actually in the Texas Bowl. They finished ranked in the top 20, but they couldn't beat Georgia. They just have too much firepower, simply put. As for how things went in terms of the college football playoff, we do end up seeing the Ohio State Buckeyes win the national championship. They've always been capable of doing this, but they just haven't been able to put it together, and finally we see that put in place. Ohio State wins for the very first time, but definitely some noticeable teams in here. UAB, who moved up to the ACC, actually does get into the playoff for the first time since moving up to the ACC. And then UConn actually did make the college football playoff, did it as a group of 5 independent, and UConn made it all the way to the quarterfinals before losing to Florida State. Louisiana Tech did represent for Conference USA, but they did end up falling in the first round of college football playoff. But this was a solid year in which, we saw UCLA, a former Big Ten school, make it to the quarterfinal. And then Utah, who is still in the Big 12, also made it to the semifinals as well. Alright boys, so welcome to year number 19 of this sim. And this time around, it's going to be a little bit of a doozy, or at least I can tell. Notre Dame's going to start off as your preseason #1 team in the nation, but that's not even the biggest surprise in here. UConn is in here as well. They are also a preseason top 5 team, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Yes, they made the playoffs last year, but can UConn make another run at it? That would be insane if they actually could. Let's see what else we got going on. Florida State looks like they have a good team. Ohio State seems poised to repeat as national champions. They certainly want to win another crown there in Columbus. UCLA's got themselves a squad. They made it to the semifinals and look to repeat with another deep run. Ole Miss and Georgia poised to, be two of the top dogs in the SEC as well. Utah looking to come out here and rep for the Big 12. Still looking for Utah to win another Big 12 championship. Clemson, we haven't heard from Clemson in a while. We'll see if they can reverse that trend and make it at least the ACC title game. Alabama's always has a really strong team. They're in the top 15 as well. Michigan always capable of making some noise up in their neck of the woods. Oklahoma State could be a dark horse in the Big 12. Cincinnati is ranked. You love to see that. Oklahoma is a serious dark horse here at number 18 in the entire country. And then starting to get into the back end of this preseason top 25 as we get into year number 19. You got Texas Tech at 19, Penn State at number 20 in the nation. Louisiana Tech is the highest ranked group of 5 team once again from the Conference USA. And then rounding out your group, you got Florida, Miami, and the Washington Huskies as part of your top 25. So we start the 2042 postseason with an update to the Heisman Trophy. This time it's provided to Randy Connors, a junior out of Iowa. Imagine that, a Iowa offensive player that was actually productive. And productive he was, man. Over 1,300 yards and 22 touchdowns in his junior campaign. Could be looking at going into the NFL in the near future, as we do get some love for FIU, who I am controlling but not really, right? So with that being said, we'll see what we got going on in terms of these conference championship games this time around. And for the conference championships, Sam Houston, they actually do end up winning their first Conference USA championship since moving up from the FBS level. Colorado State, who was a major player in the Mountain West back in the day, actually almost got to win the Pac-12, but they were going to fall just short as USC is able to claim their second Pac-12 title since its revival. Miami is going to win the MAC again. They are going to have their 4th MAC championship. Texas Tech continues to dominate, of course. They now have won 8 Big 12 title games in this sim. Arkansas State, once again, getting some love here as... Actually, no. Arkansas State wins the Sun Belt for the very first time. You love to see it. Speaking of first times for everything, UTSA... they actually win the American, which I'm surprised it took UTSA this long to win an American championship. Alabama, they're going to win the SEC. This is their 4th SEC championship. San Diego State, on the other hand, they are actually going to win their very first Mountain West title game. NC State is also going to narrowly beat Clemson. So Clemson almost wins the ACC, but NC State is going to prevail. And then finally, Penn State is able to beat Michigan in the Big Ten title game. But do you want to talk about just a run from completely left field? This is a little bit out of left field. I'm not going to lie to you. The Virginia Cavaliers win the national championship. Just simply no words. And for the most part, they did it pretty comfortably. Pretty convincing wins. They beat West Virginia. They beat NC State comfortably. They beat Penn State by 3 possessions. And then the closest game that they've played, aside of their first round matchup on the road, was Notre Dame in the national championship. And even then, Notre Dame was not even like that bad of a team, but they only were down by like a couple of possessions. So that being said, Virginia, great run for the Cavaliers as they win their first national championship out in 2042. What a run. In terms of other things of note here, this was actually a year in which we did see, USC make the quarterfinals. Penn State made the semifinals themselves. Notre Dame, however, they are still searching for their first national championship in quite some time. So here we are with the start of the 2043 season, and this is what we got going down. We're not yelling timber over here either. So Notre Dame's going to look to try to make another deep run as they start as the #1 team in this preseason top 25 by the media here in 2043. Virginia is going to try and repeat. They do get a lot of love, but I don't know if Virginia's got that juice to make a second magical run like we saw in last year's college football playoff. I expect to see some of these other teams be more likely to win it all here in 2043, such as Florida State certainly being in the picture. Penn State also should get some consideration as well. Texas Tech, Clemson also in here has some guys on their team. Oklahoma State certainly got a squad. Georgia, like always, they have one of the best teams in the country. I don't know if their overall has ever changed. I don't know if it's ever like moved from this, but you know, Georgia, Alabama, we know they got great teams. Missouri's got a good football team this upcoming season as well. Ole Miss in the top 15. They just won national championship a couple of years ago in this sim. Washington always is considered a dark horse, as is the South Carolina Gamecocks. But best group of 5 team is the Tulane Green Wave. Tulane comes out here as the top team in the group of 5. And then rounding out your group, you got Oklahoma at 20, Michigan at number 22. Ohio State is here at number 23. They're always a dark horse. And then rounding out your group is Colorado State, who's still hanging around here in the top 25 as a member of the Pac-12. They won the Pac-12 championship last year. We'll see if they can run it back. Alright boys, so welcome to the tail end of the 2043 season, and we got a Heisman Trophy winner from Liberty, and I'm not talking about the insurance company either. The Liberty Flames receiver Tony Babers had 1,200 yards and 21 touchdowns over the course of his sophomore campaign. He's got a very bright future ahead of him for sure. So for the conference championship games, meanwhile, and we could see why Liberty was so successful this year, on their way to their 8th Conference USA championship in this sim. Certainly one of the most successful group of 5 programs in the entire country. But let's check out the rest of these conference championships. USC, for example, is able to win their 3rd Pac-12 title. Oklahoma State is going to win their 2nd Big 12 championship in a few years. So Oklahoma State on a nice little run here in the start of 2040s. Bowling Green wins their 3rd MAC title against Western Michigan. So the Broncos could not defend their MAC title this time around. The Mountaineers of Appalachian State continue a strong run as they've now won 6, count it 6, Sun Belt championships, which is insane to think about. The conference championship weekend we saw, so this is a little bit interesting. So we saw Navy and Army play for the American championship game, which is what Navy won. And then week 16, actually one of the latest weeks, I think, is the Army-Navy game as well. So Navy beats Army twice in a row, which I think is objectively pretty funny to see. Wyoming is able to be beaten by Utah State in a close one, so Utah State is able to win their 5th Mountain West title. Finally get to see a Texas sighting. Seems like Texas was very quiet in this simulation, but Texas, after a couple of decades, is able to beat Missouri to win their 1st SEC championship. Clemson, they secured a #1 overall seed and beat Florida State, so the Clemson Tigers win their 3rd ACC title. And then USF does make another appearance in the Big Ten Championship, but will ultimately fall short as they lose to Michigan 35-19. But this postseason was certainly one that will be remembered for quite some time, as we had good games both in and outside of the college football playoff. One of them was the Alamo Bowl, where Kansas State is able to barely outlast Minnesota 37-32. So the Wildcats were able to secure a 10-win season because of that. We also had one of the better group of 5 matchups in bowl season, as well as Appalachian State is going to outlast Utah State in the Hawaiian Bowl. A very good experience for both teams for sure. And then in the Las Vegas Bowl, we actually did end up seeing Penn State able to beat West Virginia 42-28. It was a pretty exciting game to watch overall. But the national championship in 2043 is going to belong to Oklahoma State. This, of course, will be the first championship that Oklahoma State will win. Do get some love for, former group of 5 teams, though, right? USF was a former American team. They get to make the playoff for the very first time since becoming a member of the Big Ten. And they made it all the way to the quarterfinals before losing to the same team that they lost to in the Big Ten championship. Colorado State, meanwhile, was a premier Mountain West team before joining the Pac-12, and they played well, but just couldn't find a way to stop a nosebleed when it comes to playing Miami. Not to worry, though, because Miami loses in the very next round against Oklahoma State, where we then go on and dominate against Clemson, and then handle business against USC. So the Oklahoma State Cowboys will win their very first national championship in 2043. So here we are at the 20-year mark, actually, and we're going to go ahead and take a quick look to see how things have shaken out in terms of notable programs. Liberty has continued to show that they are one of the best group of 5 programs in the country, as they're now able to lay claim to 8 Conference USA championships in the past 20 years, but there's a new team that's definitely making some noise. Texas Tech has went about dominating things in the new look Big 12 with the absence of Texas and Oklahoma when we started the simulation, as Texas Tech has been able to lay claim to 7 Big 12 championships over the last 20 years, although they do not have a national championship to their name. However, that can't be said about Georgia, because even though Georgia has not won a national championship in the last 5 seasons, they still lead the entirety of the FBS with 4 national championships, and they also have the right to lay claim to 7 SEC titles as well. Alright, so welcome back as we now move into Season 21. We are moving quite along, quite smoothly at this point. USC is the #1 ranked team, and they did make it to the national championship game last season, but this is going to be one of those years where it literally could be anyone's title, which is, going to make things really fun on our end for sure. So Miami comes in at number 2, followed by Clemson. Oklahoma State, who did win the national championship last year, but did not receive any first place votes at all. Missouri is going to round out your top 5, followed by Notre Dame. Georgia, who's got an insane roster again. Stanford, Michigan. Colorado State is here in your top 10. Florida State is going to be at number 11 with Florida and USF. Kansas State, who I believe won the Big 12, is going to be here at 14 with North Carolina. And then in the bottom half, you got UCF, Washington State at 17, Penn State, UAB at number 19, Alabama at 20, West Virginia at number 21 with Texas. Texas has experienced some pretty lean years, but they're slowly building back up. Bowling Green is going to be your best group of 5 team, ranked at number 23 in the country. And rounding out your group is Nebraska and Texas Tech, as we now move forward to see how things shake out in year 21. Alright boys, so here we are in 2044, and we have a new Heisman Trophy winner to claim. This one is going to be Micah Michael. Now that is one heck of a name right there, but he's the quarterback for NC State, and he's going to be your Heisman Trophy winner as well, throwing for over 3,500 yards and almost 45 total touchdowns on the year, while keeping those turnovers to a minimum. However, that will not be enough to lead NC State to the ACC title game, as UAB actually wins the ACC. This is the first time that they've won the ACC since leaving the American, so they have 3 American title victories and an ACC title victory to go with it as well. For other conference championships, Ohio State is narrowly able to beat Nebraska 40-39. This is Ohio State's second Big Ten title, especially in the 2040s. Auburn has one of the better teams in America, it seems like, this year, as for the very first time, actually, Auburn is going to win the SEC. Nevada is going to be able to beat Fresno State 42-21. So with that being said, Nevada is going to win the Mountain West for the third time. Tulsa wins their second American title game. They play spoiler for Tulane, so Tulane might have not even made the college football playoff at all. Old Dominion is able to win a defensive struggle against Georgia Southern. This is Old DU's third Sun Belt championship. Bowling Green wins their fourth MAC title by beating Miami. Colorado beats TCU 28-27, so Colorado is going to win their third Big 12 championship. UCLA does win their third Pac-12 title, and Jacksonville State, first time in 2 decades, wins the Conference USA. They do so by narrowly beating Mid-Tennessee State in what was truly a thriller. Now, with that being said, even though there's always a ton of focus on the college football playoff, bowl season was still a fun one to watch, as Michigan was able to outlast Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl in a battle of top 25 teams. Ole Miss is going to finish with a solid 9-4 record as they're able to beat West Virginia. Then the last bowl game of note, in the Gasparilla Bowl, Colorado was able to beat Virginia Tech 32-22 in order to secure their 11th victory of the season. But Ohio State will go on and win the national championship. This is their second national championship in this simulation. But with that being said, we did see the Tulane Green Wave, a group of 5 team, actually make it all the way to the national championship. And not only that, we also nearly saw Tulane win the national championship. They only lose to Ohio State by a couple of points to go with it, which is a huge surprise to say the least. Now, with that being said, a couple of teams that did have buys were disappointments. UCLA and UAB did fail to make it to the semifinals, even though they were one step ahead. Nevada, who represented for the Mountain West and for the other group of 5 spot, Nevada was able to beat NC State on the road before losing to the eventual national champions. Now, before we delve into the next season of this rebuild, I did want to point out at this point, I did set up another minor round of realignment, and we decided to go in a couple of different directions. So first and foremost, what we ended up deciding to do is not only did we move USF over from the Big Ten, and we moved them over here to the ACC because it would have been a better geographical fit, but Liberty, who has been one of the most consistent group of 5 programs, they will move up from Conference USA and also become a member of the ACC. Meanwhile, even though the Big Ten did end up losing Southern Florida, they did end up replacing Southern Florida with UConn, and UConn has had some success. They should be a good member of the Big Ten. Will be somewhat close to, like a Rutgers and a Maryland, for example. So UConn makes sense for that Eastern fit for the Big Ten. And then in the SEC did end up adding a couple more teams. In the SEC, we saw Mid-Tennessee State get the bump up from the Conference USA up to the SEC. So now all 3 Tennessee programs are part of this Power 5 structure. But Tulane, who is actually a former member of the SEC, making it to the national championship game, they will be welcomed back into the SEC as well. Alright boys, so the start of season number 22 is now underway, so let's see if this newer landscape of college football creates any meaningful changes. So UCLA is actually going to start as the number 1 team in the country, but look at this! You want to talk about a high football team? There certainly is one here in Tulane. The Green Wave, number 2 in the country in their first year in the SEC. Absolutely wild stuff. In terms of some other teams to look out for, I think Notre Dame certainly should be a team to watch out for moving forward, as well as Auburn, who's also a member of the SEC. Ohio State certainly should get some love as well as the number 7 team in the country. Clemson seems like a serious national championship contender from the ACC. Oklahoma also has a top-tier football team of their own, as does LSU. South Carolina is going to be a tough out, as is Florida, Michigan, Alabama, Florida State. Ole Miss got good squads to go with it. And then rounding out your group, you got Colorado in here, Oklahoma State, and yeah, man, this is the first time in a little bit, though, where we don't have any group of 5 teams in the top 25 anymore. Alright guys, so I got towards the end of 2045 and it seems like that transition to the SEC is really showing early dividends for Tulane, because for the first time we see a Heisman Trophy winner from the Green Wave. Pierre Russ, the junior quarterback at Tulane, only threw one interception the entire years, so maybe that could be something positive for Tulane, getting a lot more attention out of the blue. And it turns out that actually does hold some water, because in the first year that Tulane was in the SEC, they make it all the way to the SEC championship. Now, they did not win the SEC. They do end up losing to Florida, which, to be fair, Florida was the #1 team in the nation. They'll have the 1 seed in the college football playoff. But Tulane's also going to get in here as well, which is the first time that I think Tulane gets to say that they can be a playoff participant without actually having to win their conference. So that's a big boost and showing early dividends already. In other news, though, we do end up seeing Michigan win the Big Ten once again. This is their 7th Big Ten championship in this sim. So Michigan just running the table, it seems like. Clemson is going to win the ACC. This is their 4th title in this sim. Nevada, once again, going to win the Mountain West. This is their 2nd year in a row, which they accomplished that. East Carolina plays spoiler and beats Tulsa convincingly. This is the first time Eastern Carolina has won the American in over 20 years. Southern Miss is able to beat Appalachian State, and so Southern Miss does get to claim their 4th Sun Belt championship. Miami beats Akron on the way to their 5th MAC title. Kansas State does end up beating West Virginia and now allow Kansas State to win their 5th Big 12 championship. UCLA will once again win the Pac-12. This is their 4th in the revitalized conference. And then Jacksonville State does win the Conference USA, narrowly beating out Louisiana Tech 20-17. However, before we report the results of the college football playoff, though, we do get a couple of notable results here. Iowa is going to go out and beat Georgia 38-33 being your final score. So the Iowa Hawkeyes were able to finish their season strong to get a 10-win season. And then in the Hawaii Bowl, we saw a battle between 2 of the better group of 5 teams in the country. Southern Miss was able to beat Nevada 35-31. So Southern Miss had an excellent season, finishing 12-2. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them ranked in the preseason top 25 going into next season. So here's how the college football playoff bracket did end up shaking out. Even with the realignment changes, we still had a team from the group of 5 make the college football playoff. The Miami Redhawks were the 5th best conference champion, and as such, Miami was able to get the 8th overall seed. However, it didn't take them very far. They do end up losing to NC State at home, but we do have our first national championship for Michigan since 2024, so it's been over 20 years, but Michigan does snap their national championship drought. They do it by finishing it off against UConn. UConn, who was just added to the Big Ten right away, made it all the way to national championship in their first year in the Big Ten, but ends up falling way short against the Michigan Wolverines, but did beat West Virginia and UCLA on the way there. Tulane did make it through the quarterfinal. They did lose to Michigan in the Peach Bowl, but to be fair, Michigan did win the national championship. But congrats to the Michigan Wolverines. They do win their 2nd national championship in this sim. Alright boys, so welcome to year number 23, where we are taking a look and seeing how things shake out here to start the 2046 season. Now, Notre Dame does come in with heavy expectations, as the Fighting Irish are going to be named the #1 team in America to start this season out, but there's some other teams out there that certainly stand in the way. Florida is certainly one of them. Oklahoma is another one of these teams as well, so we'll definitely keep an eye out for them. Tulane continues to be regarded very highly, as they're going to be ranked in the top 5 themselves. And then continuing our look into the top 25, UCLA could certainly make some noise alongside the Michigan Wolverines. UConn actually still has a solid little football team, so we can't count out UConn, which is crazy to think about, to be honest with you. LSU is going to round out your top 10. Outside the top 10, there's still some other teams that I would consider to be championship contenders. That includes Clemson at 11, Oregon at number 12, Georgia, always have that insane talent roster. They're at number 13. USC is at number 14, Texas A&M at 15. Miami University from the MAC is actually going to get a lot of love here too. They come in ranked number 18 in the country, and they come in ahead of Ohio State, which is really surprising as well. Then rounding out your group, you got Florida State at 20, Tulsa at number 21, so another group of 5 school. Louisiana Tech is also in here as well, and crazy enough, Louisiana Tech actually might have the talent to win a national championship, which is, again, really crazy to think about. And then rounding out your preseason top 25, you got UCF, who does come in number 25 in the entire country. Alright boys, so we get through most of the 2046 season, and this run of wide receivers actually continues, which is really surprising to me. Antoine Solomon of South Carolina is going to win the Heisman Trophy. He's only a sophomore too, so he might be coming back for his junior season, unless he was redshirted, of course, which is hard to tell on the screen. But 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns, and definitely feels like he lived up to the hype for this year. But it seems like that individual success doesn't fully translate onto the field, because South Carolina was nowhere to be found in the SEC title game. Instead, we do see Georgia and Tulane in here again, and Tulane once again makes the SEC championship, is very close to winning the SEC championship, but Georgia is going to will it out. They win their 8th SEC championship in this simulation. However, North Texas is going to, for the very first time in this simulation, win the American, as they're able to edge one out over East Carolina. San Jose State, the Spartans of San Jose State, they actually do end up winning the Mountain West for the very first time. So every team that's left in the Mountain West has won at least one title in this sim. North Carolina is going to come out. They win their 4th ACC championship game against Florida State. Nebraska barely beats UConn, which again, UConn, is a top 10 team, so they'll probably still be in the playoff anyways, but Nebraska will be a top 2 seed. Marshall is going to beat Old Dominion by 15, and this is actually the first time that we've seen Marshall win the Sun Belt. Miami does live up to the expectations laid out in the preseason. They do beat UMass in the MAC championship convincingly. Oklahoma State beats Cincinnati 31-21. UCLA claims their 5th Pac-12 championship since the revival of the Pac-12 over a decade ago. And then, of course, Houston is going to stun Louisiana Tech 24-14. We talked about how Louisiana Tech had the talent to possibly come out here and make the playoff, maybe make a deep run, but I don't think that's going to happen because they couldn't even win Conference USA, man. You hate to see it. Now, this bowl season wasn't particularly as exciting as what we witnessed in terms of previous years, but we did have one really good bowl game outside of the college football playoff, though, and it's the Troy Trojans taking on Louisiana Tech in the New Orleans Bowl. Was a classic of a matchup, but Troy is going to win out, and they're going to finish the season ranked inside the top 20 because of this victory. However, the results of the college football playoff, I'm going to be honest with you, my jaw hit the floor when I saw this, man. This is insane. So, UConn makes the college football playoff. They go through Ohio State. They beat Georgia in the Orange Bowl. They then go and play in the Peach Bowl, and UConn wins the Peach Bowl. And then to top it all off, we do see them play Oklahoma State in the national championship, and UConn wins the national championship. This is absolutely insane to me. So UConn wins a national title, and they are going to be the 15th different team in the sim that's going to be able to lay claim to a national championship in this simulation. Couple of other things of note, we did see another group of 5 team make the college football playoff in the Miami Redhawks out of the MAC. They actually beat Tulane on the road, but then they lose in the quarterfinals against Oklahoma State, who would go on and participate in the national championship. So we'll see if we have any other crazy things happen for the rest of the sim as we will march on to year number 24. We'll see if we have a little return to normalcy, as we do see a new #1 team in the nation to start the preseason polls. Georgia is in here as the #1 team in America. Georgia is going to be difficult to top if they're humming along like they were towards the end of last season. Now, keep in mind, UConn is certainly not too far away from making some noise in their own right, as the UConn Huskies, your defending national champions, again, crazy to think about, UConn is ranked in the top 5 as well. So some big expectations in that northeastern part of the country for sure. Now, with that said, with Georgia being at the very top, there's not really many other teams that we're keeping an eye on, but one that we are certainly keeping an eye on is this Ohio State team that is going to look for some revenge for sure after they were bounced in the first round of the college football playoff last year. Miami is certainly a team of note that I wanted to talk about, as Miami does once again get ranked in the preseason's top 25, this time showing up as high as number 15 in the country. And then we do have a couple of other group of 5 teams towards the bottom here. So we do have Louisiana Tech here at number 23 in the country. Eastern Carolina is also in here as well at number 24. And then from the Sun Belt, we got Southern Mississippi, who comes in ranked number 25 in the nation. So even though if there seems to be on the surface that a lot of the top players go to a Georgia or they go to an Ohio State, we take a look here and it seems that it's not just about Ohio State and Georgia at all. I mean, look at who the Heisman Trophy winner is. Bobby Ina is not even from either of those schools. He's from Missouri, and he was balling out at Missouri this season. He threw for nearly, actually over 4,000 yards, and also had 44 touchdowns as well, helping the Missouri Tigers to what is probably a very successful season. And those suspicions are confirmed when we take a look here, and look at this. We do end up seeing Missouri win their second SEC championship. They're able to overcome against Texas A&M, which you absolutely love to see. In terms of the other conference championship games, though, Penn State is able to beat Minnesota very convincingly. UAB is going to win the ACC, and this is going to be their second ACC championship in the last 3 to 4 years. Fresno State is going to win a close one against Nevada in the Mountain West Championship. East Carolina does beat North Texas in the American title game. Troy does end up beating Old Dominion 38-16. Texas Tech is able to win against Oklahoma State. That final score ends up being 42-21 as Texas Tech claims their 8th Big 12 title in the last couple of decades. The MAC once again returns to UMass as they're able to narrowly win one against Boise State. UCLA again is going to win the Pac-12 championship. And of course, you got that Conference USA where Louisiana Tech is going to have a top 4 seed. The Bulldogs win 35-24 against Jacksonville State, who was undefeated in Conference USA action prior to this particular game. But that 2047 championship crown is going to belong to the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State starting off as an 8th seed, as they would beat their fellow ACC opponent in Miami. Then they would go on and beat Missouri in the Fiesta Bowl, following that up with a Rose Bowl victory in a close one against Minnesota, and then in Indianapolis, winning 23-17 against the Michigan Wolverines, denying Michigan the opportunity to win their 3rd national championship in this simulation. Now, with that being said, a couple of other things to note, as Louisiana Tech did end up getting that top 4 seed like we mentioned. They were actually the 3 seed in this thing, as Texas A&M was ranked higher, but because Texas A&M did not win a conference championship, they were not afforded a bye into the quarterfinals. But this was not a great year to have a bye this year, as none of the 4 teams that secured a bye would go on to move to the semifinals of the college football playoff. But with that being said, Florida State is going to be our national champion, and this is the first time that Florida State has won the national championship in this video. So season 25 is officially upon us, and Florida State is being dubbed as the favorites to win the national championship in towards this back end of the 2040s. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of challenges that lie ahead for this Florida State team going into this season. That is including Missouri, who had a Heisman Trophy winner this past season. Oklahoma State's got a really strong squad as well. They certainly are going to have some, something to say about this national championship race. UCLA can certainly never be counted out from the Pac-12. Michigan, they were just in the national championship game last year as well. Texas A&M certainly has some guys, and they're looking to play at that extremely high level this upcoming season. Alabama, we haven't heard about Alabama very much. They haven't won a national championship since Nick Saban retired. Can that curse finally be lifted? Ole Miss will be looking to challenge. Miami's got a squad as well in the top 10, as does Notre Dame. Maryland and Louisiana Tech got some good teams as well. Louisiana Tech, again, really showing out from Conference USA. Penn State's got a really good squad at number 15. LSU has the same level of squad at number 17 in the nation. And then, as we get to rounding up our top 25, we got Washington here at 19. Oklahoma is there at 20, with Ohio State at number 21. Clemson is at number 23, Florida at number 24, and your 25th and final team is actually going to be Jacksonville State, who went undefeated last season in the Conference USA before losing to Louisiana Tech in the Conference USA Championship. Let's see if they can redeem it this time around. Alright boys, so we got ourselves towards the end of 2048, and in 2048 we do end up seeing Levi Kropog of the University of Georgia winning the Heisman Trophy, and it's definitely deserved. I gotta give that to him. He threw for nearly 50 touchdowns, 4,100 yards, definitely is a well-deserved Heisman Trophy award. Now, with that being said, with the conference championship games, this is what we saw going down. Georgia, with their Heisman Trophy winner, was able to outlast Oklahoma, as Georgia is going to beat Oklahoma 31-28, and this is the 9th SEC championship that Georgia is going to be able to win. These guys actually might be a dynasty. I don't know what else to say on the matter. Now, with that being said, we do see Pittsburgh. Yes, Pittsburgh. We haven't talked about Pittsburgh all episode, but we're going to change that here as they beat Louisville in the ACC Championship. In the second iteration of the game, Ohio State is going to beat Michigan, so Ohio State can claim their third Big Ten championship of this sim. San Diego State is going to beat Utah State by 10 points, and so San Diego State is going to be able to claim their second Mountain West title. UTSA is going to win their second American title game by beating North Texas 45-16. Troy is going to be a strong college football playoff participant, or at least a candidate, as they will narrowly outlast Texas State by a few points. Kansas State is going to beat Houston, as the Kansas State Wildcats are able to win by 11 points, as Kansas State claims their 6th Big 12 championship. Bowling Green is going to beat Miami 37-34. USC is going to beat Oregon 31-15, and USC will get their 4th Pac-12 championship. And then Jacksonville State is going to win Conference USA, but they did disappoint in non-conference action, as they were not part of the top 25, unlike what we saw for them in the preseason. Now, before I show you the final results of the college football playoff, there was one notable bowl game that I did want to talk about here in year number 25, and that is Miami able to beat Texas A&M 24-21, ending up being your final score. So the Miami Hurricanes are able to just narrowly win a close one in this particular matchup. However, it does seem like the dominance of Georgia football is actually going to continue. Led by their Heisman Trophy winner, they are able to take down Ohio State in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. A game that actually goes into overtime, but a pick six ends the national championship game theatrics. So Georgia is going to go on and win their 5th national championships in this particular simulation, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Now, that being said, do want to give a shout out to the Troy Trojans, as the Troy Trojans were able to find a way to make it in as a group of 5 representative, but they do lose on the road to the Tulane Green Wave before the Tulane Green Wave did end up losing to the eventual national champions. The Pac-12, however, did manage to get in 3 teams alongside the SEC as well, but it is Georgia that's going to win that 5th national championship, winning it here in 2048. So with there being just one super dominant program in college football, we'll quickly go through the remaining 5 years that we had left in the sim. Starting with year 26, Jacksonville State is going to win the Conference USA once again. UCLA is going to win their 7th Pac-12 championship against Boise State. Miami is going to beat UMass 35-28, and Miami wins their 7th MAC championship. Arizona is going to win their 2nd Big 12 title against Cincinnati. Louisiana is going to beat Appalachian State 28-21, and so Louisiana does win their very first Sun Belt championship. Eastern Carolina is going to beat Memphis 21-14, and so the Pirates win their 4th American title. Oklahoma does end up beating Georgia in the SEC championship, so Oklahoma does win their 4th SEC title. San Diego State does beat Utah State, and so this is the Aztecs' 3rd Mountain West championship. NC State will beat Florida State in the ACC title game, and then Minnesota will beat Maryland in the Big Ten championship. And so that national championship does end up getting awarded to NC State. Now, Georgia almost repeated. Georgia was very close to pulling this repeat off, but unfortunately, close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear missiles. NC State wins their 4th national championship. The only other program that has more at this point is Georgia, who has 5. NC State is right behind them with 4 national championships, which is absolutely insane to even think about in the first place. However, shout out to a couple of G5/former G5 programs. University of Southern Florida makes it all the way to the semifinals, as they're now a part of the ACC at this point. And the Miami Redhawks, they once again make the college football playoff as a 4 seed as well, but they were dominated by Georgia in the Rose Bowl, and Georgia, well, almost wins that national championship. But NC State, after beating Kansas State, they beat Minnesota, and they beat Texas A&M. It's actually the Wolfpack that win their 4th national title. As for year number 27 and how things shook out for year number 27, we do see Iowa beat Minnesota. So Iowa's going to win the Big Ten for the very first time. Clemson is going to take down Miami in the ACC championship. This is Clemson's 5th ACC title. Nevada is going to beat Wyoming by a friend, so Nevada is going to claim their 5th Mountain West title. Oklahoma would go on and win the SEC once again, and this is the 2nd year in a row that Oklahoma was able to accomplish this. Eastern Carolina beats Florida Atlantic, and this is the 5th American championship that Eastern Carolina is able to claim. Within the Sun Belt, Troy wins the Sun Belt, and this is the 6th Sun Belt championship that Troy was able to win. Bowling Green beats UMass, and so Bowling Green does end up winning their 6th MAC championship. Oklahoma State beats Colorado, and so the Cowboys do claim their 4th Big 12 title. UCLA is able to beat Oregon State, and this is UCLA's 8th Pac-12 championship. And then finally, Jacksonville State once again is going to win the Conference USA. They might have messed around and made the college football playoff as well, which we'll check on now. With that being said, though, it looks like that Jacksonville State did actually make the college football playoff for the very first time, and they weren't the only group of 5 team to do it. Eastern Carolina was able to also make it from the American, so 2 G5 teams. Jacksonville State was a little bit more successful. They beat Colorado but lose to Clemson in the Orange Bowl. UCLA was your number 1 team in this playoff, and they did make it to the quarterfinals before losing to Oklahoma State, but that national championship game ended up being a rematch of Bedlam, and Oklahoma was able to dominate their Big 12 counterparts as Oklahoma was able to lay claim to their very first national championship. As for how things went along in year number 28, Jacksonville State does once again win the Conference USA. Jacksonville State will claim their 8th Conference USA title. Stanford claims their 4th Pac-12 championship after winning a close one against USC. Texas Tech is able to win pretty well and convincingly against Utah as Texas Tech wins their 9th Big 12 championship. UMass returns as your MAC champions as they end up beating Akron. Old Dominion beats Troy 29-27 as the Monarchs are able to go ahead and claim their 4th Sun Belt title. Texas A&M is going to actually claim their first SEC title in almost 30 years by beating Florida. Eastern Carolina beats Memphis convincingly as Eastern Carolina does end up winning their 6th American title game. Nevada does beat San Diego State 44-14. Nevada does win their 6th Mountain West title. Minnesota beats Penn State by 5 as Minnesota once again claims the Big Ten. And Clemson wins the ACC championship convincingly against NC State as Clemson will claim their 6th ACC title. But not only will Texas A&M will go on and win their first SEC title in nearly 30 years, Texas A&M will do something that will take even longer than that. The Aggies will actually win the national championship in NRG Stadium. This is the first national championship in this sim that Texas A&M is actually able to claim, as they're able to beat North Carolina State in the quarterfinals, Minnesota in the Cotton Bowl, and then of course the Clemson Tigers, who came in as the number 1 overall seed. They beat them in what was essentially a home game for Texas A&M. Let's be real honest with ourselves here real quick. Do want to shout out Eastern Carolina, as once again the Pirates were able to make the college football playoff, but they were dispatched in the first round by the Nittany Lions of Penn State. Penn State, one of 4 teams that was able to get in from the Big Ten, but none of those Big Ten teams were able to be represented in the national championship. Meanwhile, in year number 29, we do end up seeing Jacksonville State continue its generational run through the Conference USA as the Gamecocks were able to win yet another Conference USA championship. This is their 9th that they're able to accomplish that. USC is also able to win the Pac-12 once again as they take on their team, their fellow little brother in Los Angeles, 46-39. BYU actually wins the Big 12 for the very first time since joining the Big 12 almost 30 years ago. UMass is going to beat Miami, and UMass is going to win their 6th MAC championship. Southern Miss is going to beat Appalachian State, and Southern Miss was able to come out and claim their 5th Sun Belt championship. LSU. Now, this is something I had to really look back at my notes, but this is the first time LSU has won an SEC championship in this sim, which surprised me as much as it's probably surprising you guys right about now. Rice does take down Eastern Carolina 14-6 in a bitter defensive struggle. San Jose State beats Nevada 28-17. This is the 2nd time that San Jose State has won the Mountain West. NC State gets his revenge against Clemson as NC State is able to beat Clemson by a few touchdowns. And then Iowa is able to win a very close one against Nebraska in the Big Ten championship. But the dynasty that's happening at Georgia is going to continue, because even though Georgia did not make it to the SEC championship, Georgia, however, does manage to get in as the 9th seed, and they would go on and they would beat Nebraska. They would beat Iowa in the Rose Bowl. They would also beat USC in the Peach Bowl, where once again we saw Georgia face off against Ohio State in Arlington, Texas. and Georgia was able to once again prove to win out, as Georgia wins now its 6th national championship in this simulation. One of 3 teams from the SEC making it to the college football playoff, with Auburn and LSU also getting in as well. Jacksonville State was a 4 seed, but Jacksonville State could not do anything with that 4 seed, as they were dropped right away in the quarterfinals when USC was able to go into the Cotton Bowl and win out. So this takes us into the final year of this simulation, and this is how things ended up turning out. Louisiana Tech is going to end Jacksonville State's tyranny in the Conference USA, as Louisiana Tech is going to beat Jacksonville State in the Conference USA Championship. Colorado State is going to beat UCLA, and so this is the first championship that Colorado State will claim since going up from the Mountain West up to the Pac-12. Miami of Ohio is going to beat UMass, and Miami of Ohio will get their 8th, I'm counting 8th MAC championship. Colorado is going to beat Colorado State to claim their 4th Big 12 title. Southern Miss is going to once again win the Sun Belt, as they'll take down Appalachian State. East Carolina is going to be able to beat Charlotte 23-20. Wyoming is going to beat Hawaii, and this is the 2nd Mountain West title in 30 years that Wyoming is able to claim. Auburn is going to beat Texas A&M 17-13. Florida State is going to beat North Carolina by 4 touchdowns. And then Penn State is going to narrowly beat out the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Big Ten Championship. But with that being said, this is how the college football playoff looked like, and this was a real bit of insanity here, right? So this is a year in which we saw 3 group of 5 teams make it to the college football playoff. Louisiana Tech out of the Conference USA, Eastern Carolina out of the American, and then Miami out of the MAC did end up coming in and going to the college football playoff as well. So here's how things shook out, right? So Oklahoma is going to win the national championship. That's probably the least surprising part in all of this. They beat Texas A&M, they beat Florida State, and they beat UCLA on their way to Glendale, Arizona. The shocker is all on the other side. Look what happened on the left-hand side. Eastern Carolina makes it all the way to the national championship, and their path was even more interesting. So, first of all, Miami pulls the upset off, going to Columbus and beating Ohio State in Columbus. So they go to the Fiesta Bowl, and Miami is going to take on Eastern Carolina. But then on the other side, Louisiana Tech beats Colorado. They do that at home. They actually find a way to shut out Auburn. They shut out Auburn in the Cotton Bowl, and then it set up a semifinal between Louisiana Tech and Eastern Carolina. Just absolutely insane stuff. So that's partially how Eastern Carolina is able to win a trip to the national championship, but Oklahoma finally caught up with them, as Eastern Carolina's toughest opponent in the playoff was simply too much for them. So taking a look back at the entirety of this 30-year sim, we actually saw a fair number of teams able to lay claim to a national championship, at least one national championship. For example, out of the ACC, we saw 3 different teams, with Florida State, Miami, and Virginia able to win a national championship. Texas A&M, South Carolina, and Ole Miss were able to win national championships for the SEC as well. We also saw the same happen for Colorado, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State out of the Big 10, and then, or the Big 12, I should say. Oregon won a national championship from the Big 10. Notre Dame won as an independent, and most surprisingly, what drove me up a wall is that UConn was able to find a way to win a national championship as an independent as well, or at least they mostly did it as an independent. As you may know, they did join the Big 10 late in this simulation. But only 6 programs in college football can say that they have won multiple national championships during this simulation. We had 4 that won 2 such national titles. That was Oklahoma, Nebraska, Ohio State, and that team up north. But then even then, there was 2 programs that won more than 3 national championships. North Carolina State actually found a way to win 4 national championships. It was a great representative for the ACC, but the team that won the most national championships was absolutely the Georgia Bulldogs, who were the only ones that won more than 5 national championships. In fact, they found a way to win 6 national titles in a span of 30 years. Always one of those programs that was in the picture, and that showed in this simulation here in this video. But guys, that is actually going to go ahead and wrap things up here for this 30-year simulation. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you see any of this stuff happening? Is there stuff in here that's a little bit too unrealistic? Or is this something that you could absolutely see happening in the future of college football as we embark on this 12-team era? Let me know down in the comment section. And if you made it through the entirety of this video, first of all, you are a real MVP, right? Because I know that this was a long video, and it means the world to me that you made it this far. And it took a lot of time to put together this particular video, more than I actually initially thought when I started recording this. So for it to make my efforts truly worth it, it would really mean the world to me if you go ahead, hit that like button, because this is going to get it out to not only more college football fans like yourself, but also more folks that love EA college football like I really enjoy this game. And shoot, we do plenty of other stuff here on the channel. If you're brand new and you made it all the way to the end of this video, I totally recommend you checking out some of the other stuff that we have on the channel, EA college football related. And if you like what you see, definitely hit that subscribe button for sure, man. But with that being said, this is John Jake Gaming on the mic signing off, and hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.